So other than
using-
in doping scenarios, when do you think IGF-1 is useful in a bodybuilding context on top of recombinant growth hormone?
If your liver is a bit impaired and it doesn't produce so much IGF-1, where are we going with this?
But what I don't get is
welcome back to the Supraphysiological Man podcast with Derek, more plates, more dates, Alek Matrevsky, and Vigorous Steve. Now, Alek is new to the show, and we got to start off first by giving Alek a proper stage name. Because we have Vigorous Steve, we have more plates, more dates, but Alek, we need to come up with a new name for you. So you have a YouTube name, so everybody can know your by your meme handle.
Well, God of Hormones. God of Hormones should suffice.
That one is kind of taken by another internet persona. Yeah, GH15 is the God of Hormones.
Oh, sorry, yeah, but he's dead though.
Right.
So I think I can inherit the name now.
Yeah, you've inherited the name. Yeah, you don't want to be known as Alexander the Great. He was from Macedonia, right?
Yeah, that works for me. Yeah, he was a conqueror. Fucked up half of the world all the way to India. So works for me.
I think that's a good one. So from now on, we christen you Alexander the Great.
Perfect.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, because you're we've done 2 collaborations together, but maybe other people don't really know about you. So what's your story? How'd you get here?
Well, first of all, I'd like to wish everybody a happy New Year, and I hope everybody had an amazing, holiday period.
I got awesome,
this podcast
Christmas sweater.
Yeah, this podcast it's one of the New Year's resolution goals of mine that we're making it happen, and I also want to, put forth more work in my YouTube channel and social media exposure. I've been talking behind the scenes with both of you, with Derek, for more than 6 years now. And which is interesting, this is the first time I'm actually talking face-to-face to him now. We would converse on WhatsApp for 3-4 hours, and he would end it with, "Hey, bro, this should have been a podcast." So we're not making that mistake again. So here we are. But essentially, I'm from Macedonia. I've started going the enhancement route and trying to optimize everything ever since I was 16. And initially everything went well, and then the curse of hair loss happened, and I had to figure different ways to ameliorate that. And that's how I found out about Derek, and that's how we started conversing with each other, because he was the OG of the internet regarding amelioration of hair loss and different protocols and SARMs at that point. So I started going that route and got extremely shredded to like 3% body fat. Which kind of blow up on the internet at that period. Was
that the SARM cycle? The SARM cycle that you did, that Derek made a video about, or was that another?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was, if you just look me up or just write SARM transformation on Google, like I'm the first and probably the most impressive transformation. People are like, "Oh, he's Alex Tren, he's lying, this and that," when Derek made that video about me. And then when I switched to actual steroids and I gained like 40 kg within a year and a half, people were like, maybe he wasn't lying. So that was interesting. And everything else was history ever since. I was, I proceeded to learn new things in the realm of biohacking, harm mitigation, because I'm dealing with an autoimmune disease, lupus, which happened during my high school days. And ever since, I've been trying to combat that. And this whole bodybuilding lifestyle is very counterintuitive to both longevity and somebody that has, autoimmune problems. I mean,
you've had it since high school? I didn't know that.
Yeah. In 2016, it was the initial flare. It happened during summer and just magically disappeared 3 months later. And I was good for like 2 years. And then it reintroduced itself. And I have a hypothesis that GH probably had a role to play in that regard.
Because I remember you contacted me on Facebook, remember? And then you had a super adverse reaction to GH. And first I thought it was fake because your hands were like they blew up to twice the size. I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell's going on? You know, so I didn't really understand what was going on in your body because you have such a unique disease. And, you know, and now you got a little bit better grasp on it. But yeah, that was one of the craziest reactions I've ever seen. Your hand was literally twice the size.
Yeah,
And that
but
was
you
on
know what?
Norditropin, right, Melissa?
Yeah. Oh my God, you remember? Yeah, you're probably
Yeah.
on cognitive enhancements, because that was no way you would remember that. I DM on Facebook. But yeah, that was when I switched from generics to pharmaceutical, and you know I
Yeah.
was running prior 10, 12 units of GH. I was doing the Liver King protocol, and you know looking at blood work and having high numbers, I was like, oh, probably it's legit, right? And when I switched to pharmaceutical, and I started even at half the dose. I was at around 5-6 units, and I
Mhm.
was in for a rude awakening. I saw the real
Yeah.
dangers of growth hormone, and the edema was insane. And I thought, God knows what's going on, but in reality, that's actually the difference between generic GH and pharmaceutical grade,
I think
which
maybe the generic GH you used at the time maybe we just had lower potency, or you know, you probably got a different response from it compared to the Norditropin because, of course, it's pharmaceutically produced and way
right.
more potent and acceptant. Like on one of our topics, what we're going to discuss today is 191 versus 192 amino acid growth hormone. And
Hmm.
maybe in your case, you had actually 192 amino acid growth hormone from Chinese generics, which is not as pure as Western made pharmaceutical GH. Do you think
Hmm.
that that could have been a cause of the switch that happened, or was it related to the dose
I honestly
going from
presume that. Right. I personally think that the whole 199 versus 192 thing, it's been up for grabs on the internet as a
Mhm.
potential differentiation between pharmaceutical grades and what we're getting with growth hormone. I honestly think that prior I was just getting some peptide blends, because I have clients
Mhm.
who send me blood work with CJC, with DEC, and some GRP2 having like 45 on serum growth hormone levels, or just high dose
Oh, wow.
sipamorelin. Yeah, they
Mhm.
were high as hell
I've
without
seen
having.
IGFs like 500 plus on CJC
Exactly.
Yeah.
plus.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they just do that. They pull the peptide blend thing, and
It's way
it's
cheaper
interesting.
also to produce. That's why you never know with
Obvious.
generics. Like what
Yeah.
is it exactly? The only way you could really test it, and it's a little bit, a little bit of an extreme protocol, but I've seen so many guys that use generics and they wonder, is this real growth hormone or something else? And I always instruct them, said, if you really want to know, you have to inject 2 units intravenously so it can't metabolize. You don't have to worry about the peak coming up and missing the peak if you do blood work. You do two IUs IV right before you draw blood, maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes in between. That's enough time for your blood to circulate through your body and everything becomes homogeneous, right? That the dilution is equal across everywhere in the blood. And then you draw the blood and you see that it's over the reference range. That it's 115 nanograms per deciliter or milliliter, sorry. So that's way higher than you would ever get from an intramuscular growth hormone administration, maybe 30, 33. And that's a 10 IU shot. That was the old way to check it. But if you inject GHRP6 or CJC, there's too much lag time between that attaching to the receptor and actually releasing growth hormone. So you would see that your growth hormone levels would be, basically the same as always. So you either exclude that you have growth hormone, or then you still have to wonder, what my peptide actually contains. If you continue to use it and then your growth hormone and IGF-1 levels go up, then it's very likely that it's a growth hormone secretagogue. Luckily,
Yeah, or
you can
just.
get this stuff now from compound and pharmacies. So if you go
Yeah.
legit, you have a
Yeah.
higher likelihood that you actually get the real deal.
Yeah, or you can send it to LCMS or HPLC
Yeah.
analysis, but
Mm, yeah.
that's costly and people don't know about it. But yeah, that's also some a legitimate way how
Mm,
interpret. That's how customs basically, essentially in US, know exactly what you're ordering, even if it's not like a steroids, whatever. Anything that's in their
mhm,
system and that has a reference point when they do LCMS, and they basically liquefied the compound, and presumably it's an ethanol. Every compound has its
mhm,
own signature print, and they just compare it to their data point, and they see
mhm.
what you've ordered, and they can also measure the actual concentration. So that's one
So
way that you can test your odds. actually getting busted by customs.
Just get them seized.
Yeah, just get them. Just
Awesome.
email them. Email
Yeah.
them. That address is receiving steroids, and they're just gonna
Yeah.
intercept it. And based on what's on your custom letter, you'll know whether your source is legitimate or not.
It's probably cheaper that way. You just open up a PO box in another state, send it,
Yeah,
inform the cops, and let them test it, and then
Yeah.
you see what's going on.
yeah. And you're gonna get
so funny.
you're gonna get high quality testing for nothing, for pennies.
Steve,
Yeah.
did you ever try the old Kigtropins that were like super hyped up?
Yes. Oh yes.
What
I was
was
on the
so-
GH15 boards at that time. Yeah.
I remember there was like a rumor. This was like before my time when those were popular, but there was a rumor that there was insulin in them as well or something to make it work.
Unfortunately, nobody at that time did blood work on it. So I initially ordered 5 kits. I got great response. Then I ordered 10 kits, same response. And then I ordered 30 kits, no response. So they did a little bit of a bait and switch. But what I figured, or everybody else figured, is that there was just IGF-1 in there. Because not insulin, because you wouldn't really go hypo, but IGF-1 because you get like a recomping effect, and people would get super hungry on it and have to eat. Like I literally had to eat pizza to keep weight on, because you would inject maybe 2 to 4 IUs, and if those vials were 1 milligram, whether that's IGF-1, LR3, DES, or real IGF-1 like Increlex that is not modified, whatever it was. Let's say you were to use 4 IUs and it was a 1 milligram vial, for example, you would use like 400 micrograms of IGF-1 per day. And, morning 200 micrograms and evening 200 micrograms, which is a very high dose. And everybody on the board at the time said, I have to eat pizza. Otherwise, the next day I wake up, 2 kilos lighter. And I would just get bigger and bigger and fuller and rounder and denser and harder. It was one of the best experiences I've had with an underground lab. And then, of course, those 30 kits came in. It didn't do anything. And then there was like a little rebranding, and some guy named Kublai tried to, pick up and tried to make right with everybody. So I got another 30 kits who didn't do anything. And then everybody kind of gave up on the whole ordeal. But yeah, from everybody that I knew that had Kigtropin, so I tried about 15 kits, and some buddies of mine tried 5 or 10. It was phenomenal results. Nobody knew what was in it. Nobody sent it in for analysis. Nobody did blood work. Nobody... and I was living in Holland at the time, so it was very difficult to, do more than once a year blood work.
But why would they send IGF-1 though for that cost? It's more cost to manufacture. It's more costly. I don't understand that.
Either they wanted to hype the brand, or they didn't know. They had an unlucky switch, so maybe it was all unlabeled. Right.
So we're saying literally just IGF-1 LR3 instead of any GH, or it was like had both.
No, that's a speculation, right? People after running through all those kits, and people with a lot more experience at the time than I did, and now looking back on it, I would say that the people were correct. It was probably IGF-1 or myostatin inhibitor, but I don't think that was the case, because those were really hard to find and super, super expensive. So I think that's just something that went wrong. They probably ordered growth hormone from one of the Chinese or Shanghai expos. There they have a Shanghai medical expo, and they sell growth hormone and peptides booths as far as the eye can see. So they probably ordered some GH there, and they got IGF-1 instead. Then it went to private labeling, and then it went out. Maybe they ordered like 1,000 kits or something, and then it went out, and everybody was super happy with it. So they ran through those first 1,000 kits, or maybe even more, relatively quickly. And then they ordered again from the same people who sent them bunk. So that's basically what happened. So yeah, that was a very fun experience. Yeah, I gained quite a lot of size off of those 15 kits of Kigtropin.
So other than in doping scenarios, when do you think IGF-1 is useful in a bodybuilding context on top of recombinant growth hormone?
If your liver is a bit impaired and it doesn't produce so much IGF-1, where are we going with this?
but what I don't get is you're referencing Liver King.
No, not at all.
No, because there was online supposedly the reason why his IGF-1 sucked.
Oh, come on.
Theories. Yeah. But as far as this situation, The lipolytic effect it's coming from growth hormone though.
Yeah,
it shouldn't. IGF-1 shouldn't have a greater lipolysis effect than growth hormone. Growth hormone actually does that. IGF-1 facilitates the growth. It's a growth factor.
Uptake.
It causes it causes proliferation. So I mean, it's possible, but I'm still kind of on the fence about whether this is feasible. But this was so long ago, so who knows? You just never know. Maybe it was insulin X10 because it had like a 10 times greater affinity to IGF-1 than human.
Who knows? Yeah, it could have been Lantus. Could have been Lantus, right? Because Lantus is one of the few long-acting insulin with the highest affinity for the IGF-1 receptor. And apparently there's some studies out there as well that show that Lantus helps co-secrete IGF-1. Now, again, that's, in normal individuals, not people who take growth hormone and Lantus together and then have super high estrogen levels, which is basically the ideal scenario for IGF-1 secretion. So I think growth hormone is just a starting point. And then if you can get real Increlex, which now is becoming more available, it's actually, I'm talking with people who have access to real Increlex. I mean, it's still $700 per vial. But I do know people all over the world now who are getting Increlex relatively easily. And these guys mutate like nothing else. They drop the growth hormone to maybe 4 to 6 units. Yeah, they were like on 12, 15 units before. Then they drop it to 4 to 6. And then they go on Increlex, maybe 50 micrograms to 100 micrograms, per side bilaterally. And these guys mutate. It's disgusting.
They sell
average genetics.
Compounded IGF-1 through pharmacies now, the compounding pharmacies in the States. And I'm pretty sure they are just, I don't think so. I think it's just straight IGF-1. I'd have to check though.
That would be good. That would be good because the problem with LR3 is that there's less affinity, or it has more affinity for the binding protein, and this has no affinity.
The affinity for the receptor is like magnitudes higher than bioidentical, I think. I'd have to check.
Yeah.
I think a good idea to facilitate IGF-1 increase is just using insulin, because the insulin and IGF-1 can bind to each other's receptors. Insulin has a greater affinity to bind to IGF-1 than IGF-1 to insulin receptors, and just doing something like Lantus in conjunction with growth hormone would maximize IGF-1 output outside of IGF-1 and everything else.
LR3 retains the pharmacologic activity of IGF-1 as an agonist of the IGF-1 receptor, but it is approximately 3 times more potent than IGF-1 and has a half-life of 20 to 30 hours, whereas IGF-1 is 12 to 15.
Yeah, so it has a longer active life. And even though most people would still prefer to inject it pre-workout, and then some guys prefer the IGF-1 DES, but you never really know what people are using because, again, the underground lab scene, you're never really sure what the potency is, what the transportation has been like. Has it come from China to a remailer to your dealer to you, right? Or has it come directly? So there's a lot of shipping issues there and cold and hot temperatures and that kind of stuff. So that's why I think some people prefer IGF-1 LR3 over DES simply because the potency is different and the shipping has been
why would LR3 be so inferior to Increlex if it is 3 times more potent than bioidentical IGF-1? And as far as I know, Increlex is just recombinant IGF-1. So you think the IGF-1 LR3 is all just quality is what you're saying?
Yeah. Everybody's been looking for a legit IGF-1 LR3 for a while now because I get the DMs. Steve, where's so I don't know. I haven't really seen it,
It's so easy to get like decent generic GH now though, or at least if you're connected enough, that it would seem unrealistic to me that LR3 is this hard to come by in proportion to like a generic GH, because you can get good generic GH like relatively easily.
Sorry, let me give you an example, a step above this conversation, because I'm on immunosuppressants, and I'm sure you've heard that they are very, very expensive. I'm talking about ranging from, in the standard US prices, from $600 per month. Some are $400,000 per month, like absurd prices. Yeah. They're banking off people's lives. But I found and tested actually some immunosuppressive meds, bought them from China in raw format, and did LCMS analysis on them. and they matched pharmaceutical grade levels. Actually, one of them had greater potency. So the peak on the LCMS had a greater, the raw had a greater peak at 4 milligrams versus 4 milligram tablets, pharmaceutical grade.
Oh, wow.
So if they can produce drugs that are so expensive, more expensive than IGF-1, more expensive than growth hormone, that are patented by Pfizer, by these insane brands with multi-billion-dollar companies, I don't think that IGF-1 is that hard to crack, as Derek said. I don't think so either. Believe that.
It must be like degradation in transit, but then again, even that, I'm skeptical of how much that happens, to be honest. So I'm just I feel like a lot of this is just like bro lore that is like passed through the grapevine, to be honest. I don't know.
The problem is nobody posts these HPLC tests online, right? Because a lot of the sources that carry IGF-1, they might test something, but you never really see an HPLC test from IGF-1, LR3, or DES, or whatever. So we're all kind of shooting in the dark. And that's why I just recommend most people just go with pharmaceutical, unless it's completely unaffordable and you can find something cheaper online, in homebrew or whatever. You want to take that risk,
It could also
order it yourself and make it yourself.
Or you can just buy a pharmaceutical brand and then buy generic and then send them for testing as a reference sample and compare the LCMS graphs and see how close they are, whether they're the same compound or not. I think that's the best bang to the buck.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think that's a valid approach to do, and you can see if you need to adjust the dosing of the generic going forward. Sourcing pharmaceuticals, it's always a little bit of a gray area, of course, because the prescriptions are very limited, and only in a select few countries. Like the pharmacies in Macedonia and Thailand are far more free compared to other countries. Like in America, I went to CVS and Walgreens, I couldn't get anything. I could get some Preparation H with phenylephrine, to thin your skin if you want to, or NyQuil. That's basically the most exciting thing I could get without a prescription. Walking into the pharmacy here, and I'm sure it's the same in Macedonia, you can get anything without a prescription, and so that opens doors for people who are into using these kinds of drugs.
It's so weird, like the different regulation, even at like the supplement level too. Like for example, ephedrine you can buy from Kaizen, which is like a protein manufacturer that sells at Costco. They have like private labeled ephedrine that's on the front counter of like every GNC. But ephedrine you wouldn't be able to buy it in that format in the States. You have to get it in that like medication format. And then Yohimbine, banned in Canada, not banned in the States. Like, where is the logic in that? It's just like vice versa. I don't know.
Just lobbying. Lobbying.
Yeah, but like for like obscure stimulants and like it just is odd. I don't know.
Go to Australia, you can't get anything there.
Yeah.
And if you can't get it, it's like $500. Yeah. So
same thing.
All the Australians come to Thailand to do
same thing in Germany and most of Europe. Same thing when I was in Germany, tried to get an SSRI, and they were like they legitimately got mad at me. Like they were angry.
Yeah.
How dare you demand this? It was really, really crazy. So yeah, the regulations
are different. Humalog over the counter in the States, I don't think you can get either. But in Canada, you can just walk up to any pharmacy and ask for it. At least
I think there's a couple insulins you can get, but it depends on
the state. There is, but they won't.
Yeah,
I think they're more careful with the fast acting over the counter, unless that's changed, or perhaps I'm misremembering. But I know a lot of people were like IMing certain insulin to get like faster onset because they couldn't get Humalog as easily as you could in Canada, or they would travel to Canada to get Humalog and like come back, kind of thing.
Yeah, or go to Mexico or whatever. The weird thing is about like CVS and Walgreens. Like I wanted to buy a bottle of NyQuil because I had throat flu issues and it was all congested and stuff because it's such a dry area in Las Vegas. And then this one they had to get from behind the cabinet. It was not on prescription, just over the counter, but it's behind the cabinet because people, drink those in one swirl, apparently. So they had to bring it to the counter. It was waiting there for me. We did a little bit of shopping. You pass through the cookie aisle, trying to not to look at the, all the, the ice cream and all that stuff that they have there. And then I got the NyQuil And then the guy that worked at CVS, he's like, I asked him, how do you take this? I said, yeah, just drink it whole, but do it outside. Dude, this is not what you should tell me. I said, that's good. I don't have an American passport. So I walked out, and then I had like a little, that stuff is strong, dude. That stuff is really strong. Yeah. So, so CVS, I had some prescriptions written for me by a very friendly doctor, but he was not in the same state as Las Vegas. So I walked in with scripts into the CVS in Las Vegas and Los Angeles, trying to get a script filled for some of the medications I was running at the time. They didn't want to do it because it was not the right state. Yeah.
Speaking of Vegas,
yeah,
speaking of Vegas, you actually went there both, and you met each other. So how did that come about?
It was in Los Angeles. It was in Los
Angeles.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Oh, I assumed it was Vegas.
So, Derek, you had like 500 podcasts scheduled?
7, I think. But yeah, basically the same. Yeah, we met up. I was in LA for 1.5 days or something. I don't even remember. But I did a podcast in Culver City, and Steve was like 45 minutes away. So we met up and went for dinner, and that was good. And got to meet his wife and shoot the shit and eat a bunch of bad food. So solid.
Yeah, Cheesecake Factory. It's the best.
Did you go to the Olympia, to expos, or anything like that? Because Steve sure did.
No, I didn't go to Vegas, dude. I just went to.
Sorry. Because I saw Steve. I saw Steve. He was effectively mugging every pro there. He was deliberately picking for the classic physique guys. The second and third call-outs were literally scared of him. Every picture, he's twice their size. And I'm like, you're just missing a 10, bro, to make them to make that cortisol really shoot out.
Yeah. So I ate royally, right? Every day I went to Cheesecake Factory, almost in LA. And then I went to Denny's one time, and all the Americans reminded me you shouldn't eat at Denny's. But, pop culture reference, I had to eat there at least once. So I had a great meal with Derek. I like it. Good value it's okay there. To me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay to me. Dude, you come from Thailand where the sandwiches are like this big, and one bite it's gone. And you come to Denny's and the sandwich is like, look at it, it's like, can I finish this? And all these hash browns, can I finish that too? You can't, but it's so much food. It's nice. So I ate good food with Derek, and a couple of days before that. So by the time I came to Vegas, I was properly filled out. I was full as a house.
I've been approached to take notes.
Yeah. No, but they were all depleted. So I was full as a house, but they were depleted. And some of them looked the same size or a little bit smaller. Again, classic physique guys. But dude, when you see these IFBB pros depleted, they're big as a house. Andrew Jacked, huge. The nicest guy ever. Super nice guy. I talked with him. He tried to work into the machine. I said, no, take it, man. You're competing. I mean, competitors go first. So we had a good chat. And I saw Samson Dauda and a lot of these guys that are quite large. So some of the new guys that are competing at the Mr. Olympia. And it's something else in the real world. And I've seen a lot of people at the World Championships. They're huge, but this is... So I only saw Ramy a little bit at the meet and greet and then on stage. And I knew when he walked out that I watched the prejudging on the web stream, and then finals at the venue, because I only could get tickets for finals. And even then I sat all the way in the back because I had no idea how big or small the auditorium was. So I'm sitting all the way in the back trying to watch the show, and Ramy walks out and he does a side chest, and you see these bulges out of his quad, and you could see that he missed the mark completely. And then I think Chad Nichols sometimes has a little bit of an issue by getting these guys too full, and then they spill over, which is a common practice, fill and spill. And they have one day to clean up. But I think they spilled a little bit too much, and they cleaned up a little bit too hard. So he looked watery and soft and a little bit flat. And then all these weird muscle shapes, right? The triceps were not full enough. The quads were a little bit bulgy. The lower back has some issues. I mean, he looked so off. Like Ronnie in 2007 or 2008 when he tried to come back to defend his title.
Oh, yeah.
After Jay beat him. Like 2003, he was like mad full. He looked super impressive. The best Ronnie ever. And then he tried to duplicate that, and he just looked like a blurry mess. And that's what Ramy looked like to me. So he got 5th. And honestly, I had Samson Dauda over him. Being there in the show and watching the pictures and talking with Milos Sarcev, was a super nice guy and apparently watches this kind of stuff also. Yeah, so that was good to hear. And so I talked with Milos a little bit, and I told him, said, I think that Samson was 5th and Ramy was lower. He said, well, yeah, first show, you'll take it.
Yeah.
Then we had
and
a
it's
good
an
discussion
Olympia.
about insulin. Yeah, and he's an Olympian, right? So you can't push him down too far. And then we had a very long discussion about insulin and bloated stomachs, which, if you know how to do insulin right, there's no bloated stomachs. None of my clients ever had bloated stomachs, and very little of his clients besides Dennis James. But I think that was just a diet thing here in Thailand.
Funny you mentioned.
I'm
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so funny you mentioned some of these things because people online really threw Big Ramy under the bus. Like every outlet were shitting on him so badly, but the same guys were having him as first all the way throughout.
Me too.
The prep.
Me too.
Yeah.
I had it first too, but he missed the mark.
Yeah, he missed the mark, but they don't say that. They say he has, his back's atrophied, he's done nerve damage, this and that. The most apparent flaw that I saw was the holes in his outer quad sweep, and I personally think that that's due to surgery. I think he had an immune response to something that he injected years prior. Because if we look in retrospect, when he walked on stage, the whole quad would wobble except the outer sweep. And people were, assuming that he has SEO there. And what usually happens is people develop cold abscesses, which is basically when the immune system gets dysregulated and perceives the oil as foreign infiltrator, but there's no bacteria. So it basically governs a coagulative parameter to be formed around the oil to encapsulate it, to isolate it. And that in itself is not harmful towards the health. But as he grows, it's going to compress on nerves and blood vessels and potentially cause hypoxia and tissue necrosis. And I think he had surgical intervention because he probably got sick or he had some symptoms. Otherwise, his squats would have looked like previous. His lower back and everything was, throughout prep the same, but he was so watery on stage. And also he had lumps in his upper glutes bilaterally as well. So he definitely has some problem.
I can see past that. Half of the competitors have that.
It's exactly.
Just injectable ATP or AMP just to fill out, as a vasodilator. Usually they inject like 10 milliliters before getting on stage. But yeah, there was definitely something funky going on. And I think this guy needs something like dry needling to kind of, repair that tissue or just say throw in the towel. But I just see too many flaws for Ramy to come back. But then again, we've seen a lot of great comebacks in bodybuilding. So if he wants to go for it and try it, then by all means do it.
I mean, throughout prep, he had shredded lower back and Christmas trees and everything. His insertions didn't change from 2 years ago when he won 2 times consecutively. I think he really was spilled over, and what that made him lose his shape and made him look smaller. And I think a lot of it is with growth hormone rather than insulin. Because if we look at growth hormone, it has a variety of ways how it really fucks up with fluid balance and mineral balance. Not only not only does it agonize the raw system, it can bypass it completely. It can skip aldosterone synthase and directly tell the adrenals to release aldosterone. And also there's another pathway via JAK2 STAT5 on a cellular level. It can increase angiotensin 2 and pull even more water. So you can really swell up and lose your shape on growth hormone. And I think that's the biggest problem people are facing. It's not cutting the GH, because when they're in prep, they're using GH to maintain fullness, but they account for their electrolyte and water intake when they're depleted through prep. And when they load a lot of shit, as peak week comes up, and they don't account for that. And with the overactive renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, I think that's where the problems happen.
Blow up.
You blow up everywhere.
Both. Over.
Yeah.
So little secret, what I used to do is I used to cut the GH out 3 weeks before the contest. It's usually enough time for the RAS system to kind of normalize and the fluid retention to come off. And then I would reintroduce it 2 days before. And I know several IFBB pros who do this. They have to make weight for Classic or 212. They really suck down. The growth hormone comes out, and maybe even the testosterone comes out 3 weeks before. And then they reintroduce it after making weight. So you have like 2 days to reintroduce the GH. And then because they're so insulin sensitive, the insulin resistant effect that don't really matter, and they load 12, 15, 36 IUs growth hormone leading into the show. And that works. Yeah, that's pro bodybuilding. It's okay. It's 2 days. I know some of those guys, they continue that and then they blow up after the show. They just run tests because they pull the test, they reintroduce it, let the estrogen come up. You get a little bit anabolism and just normal lipid levels, right? So test an insulin, no aromatase inhibitor, or other DHT drugs, and they mutate.
I did the same thing.
It's beautiful to see.
I did the same thing when I was on SARMs, and I would just slam a bunch of growth hormone and blow up and post a video when I'm vascular and full, and people assume that I'm on drugs, on androgens, because I was blasting full all the time, and I was just blasting growth hormone and nothing else. It really.
How was your blood pressure when you were doing that?
It didn't jump above 130. I was never in the above stage 1 hypertension because I was so lean. You remember I was at around 3% body fat. So I would blow up with 7 pounds, 8 pounds of water. But
because we're talking about fullness right now and cosmetic benefits, which I think undisputably useful for synthetic fullness, essentially, that you can kind of stimulate or simulate a better look. But actual real tissue accrual, what is your guys' stance on pushing it in? How important do you think it actually is in off-season phase?
Growth hormone?
Yeah.
I'll let Steve go first.
I think it's essential if you really want to pack on the mass, but the effect from growth hormone is part of it. It's also downstream effects from IGF-1. And let's be honest, most guys that use growth hormone use other stuff. So how much of an effect you get from the testosterone and perhaps the nandrolone, et cetera, and then the growth hormone on top, I think there's a synergy there, that's for sure. Right? You have several different pathways which induce anabolism, and I think growth hormone is part of that. You just got to keep in mind that during the off-season, insulin resistance you have to manage very specifically. So you need a glucometer to check your blood glucose levels multiple times per day. And if you use insulin multiple times per day, you might induce insulin resistance acutely from the free-form fatty acids. And even if you use insulin, it might not actually work properly at the receptor site. But if you're not fully glycogen loaded and you do high volume workouts, for example, you improve your insulin sensitivity again. And if your IGF-1 levels come up, you have some overlap with these insulin and IGF-1 receptors, and then it kind of balances itself out. So most of the guys that I work with that are really meticulous and are on top of their stuff, they don't really have these issues of poor insulin sensitivity. Now, you eat a hamburger on Sunday, right? Or some cake or some Ben & Jerry's, some ice cream, some saturated fats, some garbage. Sunday, insulin resistance is right there. So a lot of these guys that are very serious and they take high dosages of GH and insulin, whatever, they just eat clean the entire off-season through because they don't want these saturated fats or simple sugars or high fructose corn syrup, right? That could inhibit their muscle building process because you get insulin resistance like that, or peanut butter, right? Or MCT oil that all goes straight into the skeletal muscle and stores as intramuscular triglycerides, which is also not very good for your insulin sensitivity. So, of course, we always look at the drugs, but as boring as it sounds, the diet and the training, it still plays quite a big part. And that's why I think a lot of the people who don't get that part, they do take the drugs, and then they are met with all the side effects that the IFB pros don't have because they're just in the gym all the time and training their ass off and eating the boring foods that they should be doing, whereas general population or the gym rats or the guys that want to be pros but don't have the work ethic, they have all the side effects, and that's why their hands are all swollen. Besides, lupus and immunodisease issues excluded, and they have lower back pumps and they have cranial growth and all that stuff. So, yeah, or maybe they just don't have the genetics for it.
The problem with growth hormone use is I don't think growth hormone itself is a really good idea to use as a growth factor. We want IGF-1, obviously.
Yeah.
The insulin resistance can't really be mitigated that much because growth hormone impacts insulin resistance via 3 mechanisms. The first one is direct on a cellular level. So it hijacks as insulin's transcription on cellular level. So once growth hormone and insulin bind to their respective receptors, they have a downstream signaling cascade. And growth hormone via the Janus kinase what was IRS-AKT pathway, it intercepts insulin and it blocks its signaling before it's finalized cellular transcription. So that's why
receptor substrate. Yeah.
So it's not at the receptor sites; it's actually in a cellular level. And immediately, as a response, there's a decrease in growth hormone secretion. There was a really good study on this. They gave growth hormone to 19 growth hormone deficient men, and they basically measured their insulin secretion relative to their fat oxidation. And when they found out at week 1 versus month 6, is they were extremely correlated inversely. So insulin secretion decreased by 52% immediately on the spot and remained decreased below baseline by 32% even at month 6. So insulin is not released appropriately, whereas fat oxidation was above 60% above baseline throughout the whole time. So you can't really mitigate that. And the other mechanisms is through lipotoxicity from free fatty acids just circulating in the bloodstream. If the muscles do not uptake them to use them for fuel, they're going to go into the liver and they will build up. So that's the onset of hypertriglyceridemia, right? So that's a problem, and it's going to induce toxicity like that. And there's a third mechanism where it causes glucogenolysis at the liver. So it raises blood sugar like that. So there are a lot of cascades where growth hormone facilitates insulin resistance. And you can't really mitigate that except in the off-season if you split the growth hormone rather than doing it daily or multiple times during the day, as one would do during contest prep to facilitate lipolysis. Use it 3 times per day. No, every other day or 3 times per day at a higher dose. It's shown in basically in growth hormone deficient kids that it didn't matter as far as growth outcomes, but they found significantly decreased effects on insulin resistance. So I think that would be a smarter approach.
I thought there was a study that showed the effects were literally identical, essentially, you doing every other day relative to everyday administration on growth effects. Is that not? Am I misremembering that? Where it was like, and then there was a lot of people kind of like concluded after that maybe we've been overdoing it, doing it on an everyday basis, unless it's for lipolysis.
Exactly.
Like if we're talking about in the spectrum of like growth, not like lipolytic.
Yes. Because you're after the IGF-1 conversion because that's the growth factor. You're not after lipolysis when you're bulking. You're trying to mitigate insulin resistance because that's gonna fuck you up. So that's exactly what I was talking about. You don't want to do it daily if you're bulking. If you're cutting, spreading it throughout the day around times you're active, because those fatty acids you can oxidize them. You can oxidize them through activity, right? So just do them before cardio training,
So that effect also works during the off season when you take your growth hormone before fasted cardio and before activity. That helps quite a bit. But you can, this is a very old school protocol, which I modified a little bit. You take your weekly dose of growth hormone, you look at the total, but you split it out over 3 or 4 days. So you have several days where you're off the growth hormone and several days where you're on the growth hormone. But the on growth hormone days are actually higher dosages, right? So instead of using 4 IUs per day, you use 6 IUs 3 times per week, for example, or 8 IUs 3 times per week. And in that context, you see that insulin sensitivity stays sustained as well, because the exposure to growth hormone is now only, let's say 3 injections. So that's 36 hours per week. Whereas otherwise it would be 72, 84, if my calculation is correct, 84 hours per week. So you're exposed to growth hormone less, even though the dosages are significantly higher. And then you can mitigate, the other days with some IGF-1 or insulin, right, to actually help with nutrient partitioning. Then, of course, occasional mini diets and stuff. So I wrote all of this down in ebooks. But of course, there's not so many people who could actually benefit from that, because those are the big freaks. Like most people would never even get to that point of really losing insulin sensitivity if they do everything correctly. It's half of the time it's just because they're managing their diet and their exercise poorly, and they're not paying attention to carnitine intake and all these little things you can do to optimize, your fat oxidation and that kind of stuff.
But the problem is the effects are very acute, though. Like I've shot 4 or 5 units of growth hormone, and then 2 hours later tested. It shoots up immediately. So again, I would like, holy fuck, and I would go and do cardio at the gym, to offset that. So people don't understand how rapid those effects are. That's basically the study that I quoted. 52% decrease in insulin secretion immediately at an HRT dose, because those were growth hormone deficient men. So they were not given supraphysiological amounts. Now imagine when you're pushing it and you're self-inducing acromegaly. Then that's a whole different story.
So, and a lot of people, they check their blood glucose infrequently, or they do blood work. And they're like, yeah, my glucose, my fasting insulin, that's all good. But why is my hemoglobin A1C so high? And why are my triglycerides so high? Right? All these little things, high triglycerides, high hemoglobin A1C. Yeah, it's just an indication of growth hormone abuse. And it's, I think you can get away with quite low dosages, 2 to 4 units, which shouldn't impact your overall health dramatically, assuming that you're training and dieting correctly. And then you look into other pathways, a little bit of anabolism, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, that would mitigate a lot of side effects and not be problematic in the long run.
There's also the component of genetics, though. So for myself, for example, when I use growth hormone, I used it from 2017 towards the end of 2019. And thank God my mom's a dentist, and she realized that when I was talking, as I was chewing also my food, I had an underbite. And she told me there's something wrong with you, with your mandibula. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm fine. And she said, no, you're gonna have to go get an X-ray done. And she basically busted me for growth hormone abuse. And it was very like, yeah.
She did a natty or not on you?
Yeah. She put a Derek on me. She busted me. But yeah, dude, that's and people are like, you need to use growth hormone for years and years and years before these symptoms, you can see them, or even you need to use it for months so you can see the effects, which is absolute bullshit. It works immediately, both good and bad. And if one is prone to, growth of tendons and ligaments and bones, then you're in for a rude of awakening. I wore braces for a year and a half up until recently to fix that, because it wasn't that apparent, but my mom busted me, and she probably watches there.
So she knows.
Yeah, but that's important.
Knows how to recognize, right?
Yeah.
What about the anti-aging effects of growth hormone, Derek? Do you have any insights in this? Because I would like to discuss it, but you've been a little quiet. So I'll let you go first.
I think it gets conflated way too much with different things that can spike it. Because, for example, if we're fasting and growth hormone goes through the roof, that is different from downstream growth factor production. Like, you could have a spike in GH that is astronomical on paper, but it does absolutely nothing for downstream satellite cell proliferation, myonuclear donation, etc. So I think it depends on the context in which we're speaking. If it's exogenous GH use coupled with a bodybuilding diet, coupled with an insulinogenic environment, no, total antithesis of anti-aging for sure. And it's I guess it depends, because it's quality of life versus quantity. If you're somebody who could otherwise benefit from a certain amount of GH and growth factor production to reinforce the structural integrity of your bones, ligaments, connective tissue, whatever, yeah, sure, it's anti-aging. But the actual lifespan, not so much. So
no,
it kind of depends. But yeah,
I think the benefits have only been shown in growth hormone deficiency cases. When you really look at it, when they prescribe growth hormone to kids with short stature, or adults with growth hormone deficiency, then quality of life tends to go up. And I think a lot of people, they think that because their skin looks more youthful and their hair grows a little bit better, that's an anti-aging effect. But that's purely topical. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, having your nails grow faster and your skin looking better and your hair looking better, of course, is a benefit. That's such a topical anti-aging. I mean, there's so many better ways to anti-age. Besides,
and I think in the context of anti-aging in the deficient, you're bringing your capacity to actually have those effects be at a homeostatic, healthy set point is normal. But for somebody who's otherwise trading the future for now for better skin, better nails, whatever, by pushing their IGF-1 and other growth factors and whatnot, and using exogenous GH, I think you're just trading years forward your ability to potentially have supported those things for the better featuring of them now, so to speak. You're kind of taking away from the future for now, sort of thing. But obviously in the context of deficiency, which applies for almost no one here, it's like, it is
Exactly.
anti-aging, because I think you would not be able to support like organ systems and stuff if you're otherwise in a deficient state, obviously, as well. It's just like testosterone, you know, if you are at 100 nanograms per deciliter, like obviously your heart's not going to function as well as it would have if it had adequate testosterone and downstream all the different conversion pathways saturated properly. But then when you push it to like, I don't know, 2000 nanograms per deciliter, if you otherwise don't have like AR, like insensitivity or some shit, then like it's not anti-aging. Like you're just trading like future ability of like cardiovascular support, like kidney resilience, blah blah blah, for the now of like higher quality performance, potentially vitality, perceived quality of life, etc. So again, like the answer I think always comes down to like, you just need to be in the healthy spot that is like as close to optimized for highest, you know, quality of life relative to like, what is your deemed trade-off? Like everyone kind of has to decide at some point, would you rather be like a frail, you know, like you could probably extend your lifespan another however many years by just like losing a shit ton of weight, being like fasting all the time, having low libido, like but that's not.
Oh, that's why the castrati they live so long, right? The castrati they live very long lives.
And so you got to be careful when you extrapolate out those studies and you're like, oh, look how healthy these people were. They lived to 100 years old when they were like deficient of androgens or something. It's like, and they had no hair loss and they had all this, you know, but it's like at what cost? Like, did you actually enjoy your life with like no function? Probably not.
Is it longevity if you never really live life? But also, is it increased hair growth and nails an indication of anti-aging? Because that's also an indicative of cellular proliferation happening, and that's also rushing. But that's also an indicator that you're rushing towards your death as well. You're splitting cells faster, so once they split a certain amount of times, they will die sooner. So that's a problem. And if we look at the extremes, people with acromegaly, and this is what it's kind of weird to me. Correlation, is not causation. They're not shredded. They're not big per bodybuilding standards, right? People are associating growth hormone with you being extremely shredded. You can eat burgers and everything, and just maintain abs year round. Take a look at acromegaly patients. They're miserable and they die from heart failure and pituitary dysfunction very early on. Like they trade 20 years off of their life, depending when they're getting diagnosed. So, if somebody is doing everything right, if they're training, if they have high protein intake, or should rather adequate protein intake, and they're doing everything right, and how would they be even growth hormone deficient unless they have some, underlying illness going on, maybe a tumor or anything, something like that really interferes with endocrine signaling. If you do everything right, you'll be good.
Yeah, if you want to improve like sleep quality, or which is one of the real benefits of growth hormone, right? You feel more rested if you take it before bed. I think 1 to 2 units is more than enough. Now, if you want to, do bodybuilding stuff, okay, maybe 4, 6, 8, depending on how much IGF-1 and insulin is in the picture. At which point you can use less growth hormone. But I think for most people, 1 to 2 units is totally fine. And I stopped growth hormone, then I reintroduced it again, and now I stopped it again because I think that NAD plus and NMN and those kinds of drugs, the nicotinamide pathways, that's real anti-aging, because those are actually being used in enzymatic reactions and DNA transcription and donor and converting. Like if you look at the enzymes which are dependent on NAD plus or NADH, so that's nicotinamide adenine dinucleotides, which is either oxidized or reduced, in the donation of electrons, they can metabolize one thing to another. And when you look at the list, basically everything is dependent on NAD plus, the conversion of testosterone into estrogen or androsterone into testosterone or vice versa. So I think some of these enzymatic reactions, they really downregulate when you age. And I've been experimenting now with NAD plus and nicotinamide mononucleotide for months. And that mitochondrial support stack is finally finished now, so that will be up next week. I feel like I aged backwards 10 years.
The only tough thing I have with that kind of stuff is like, as you age, everything goes down. So it's like, when do you get to the point of, oh, you got to supplement this back up to get it where it was when you were 20? It's like, well, it's like my entire, like every fucking thing in my body. Like at what point?
And brain.
Yeah.
And brain.
So it's like, at what point are you just like, are we hyper focusing on one? Like, I guess some things are more impactful than others, because as much as I would scrutinize potentially focusing on the NAD pathway, obviously using testosterone, if you're deficient, massively impactful solely on its own, and you're still not focusing on a bunch of other shit that is, deficient potentially. So there's definitely two sides to that argument. I'm kind of arguing with myself as I'm saying it out loud, but yeah, it's some of the NAD thing I'm skeptical of, dude. Like that, like what is the flushing reaction that occurs again? Like when you take IV administration of it, is it similar to a hyper aggressive version of a nicotinic acid flush, or what does it feel like?
No, so this feels a little bit different. So with nicotinamide NAD plus, right, you have to dilute it quite substantially. So I would say 250 milligrams in 250 milliliters or 500 milliliters of normal saline solution, and let that drip over an hour. And even then, when you combine it with glutathione, vitamin C, or other very potent antioxidants, which also make you feel a little bit weird as it goes in, it literally feels like you're coming off the roller coaster. So you get that weird sensation in your stomach when you're going up the roller coaster, and just before you go down, you feel like your heart is sinking, right? Oh, I don't know, a little bit of anxiety for what the ride is going to be. So that's how you feel for an hour straight. And some people can't deal with that. That's why they have NAD injections with the really slow one that take like 3 or 4 hours. Now I'm quite resilient, and I've gone through many different sensations in my life. So for me, it's not really a big deal anymore. But out of all the anti-aging stuff that I've tried over the last couple of years, I would say that NAD plus has been one of the most profound in how I feel. I feel healthier. My blood work looks better. I sleep better. I'm more productive. And of course, that's on top of a TRT or steroid cycle. And NAD plus, I would feel, is not enough. You would still need to supplement with nicotinamide mononucleotide, which is the precursor, or some people prefer nicotinamide riboside, which is the precursor to NMN. But they say that NMN isn't really biologically active because it still needs to be broken down before it gets into the cell membrane, before it can produce NAD plus. So you have a little bit of breaking down and reassembly within the cell membrane, the cytoplasm. So regardless of what studies you do, because again, when you look at the studies, it's like half truths, similar to thymosin beta-4 being used as the benefits for TB500, or body protection compounds being used for the benefits of BPC157, or some of the other SMAX, Alek, etc. So the evidence is quite wishy-washy. What I do know is that after experimenting with this for months, a weekly administration of NAD plus and a daily spacing out, of 100 milligrams to 150 milligrams of NMN with each meal up until the last meal, otherwise you stay awake. Man, energy for days.
So how do we even know even the IV administrations are getting like intracellularly to do what it's supposed to do, and it's not just floating in systemic circulation causing like...
I believe that NAD plus can transport the cell membrane, from what I've understood. So
I don't think there's any literature to like prove that, though, right?
And he says anecdotally.
Yeah, anecdotally.
Like, so if you feel more energized for days, then something must be going on, because you're aware of how things work.
I've tried NMN by itself. I've tried NR by itself. I've tried NAD plus by itself for, let's say, a couple of weeks in duration, and then in combination. So for me personally, a combination of a weekly administration of NAD plus and daily NMN, that works the best. But I also know other people that say that NAD plus doesn't do anything for them on top of NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide. Now, why is that? There's no pharmaceutical NAD plus available. I've found some places, some compounding pharmacies in Germany that package it up real nicely, make it look very professional, same as here in Thailand, but it's not registered as a pharmaceutical. I can't find any registered NAD plus in any of the databases.
How are they selling it?
Pretty sure we have access to it, but I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how legit some of these NAD plus projects are, and some of them are highly expensive. Like NMN works totally fine by itself, but you'll have to basically double the dose to I don't know, 500 to 1,000 milligrams per day. And then you get the same effect as doing a weekly injection of NAD+, and let's say 250 to 500 milligrams NMN. So you can half the dose by doing weekly injection.
At what age, and this is so vague and such a bad question potentially, at what age would you look to support that pathway, and how would you define it as like a worthwhile investment? Because it's not cheap.
No, it's very expensive. This will cost you hundreds of dollars a month, if not over 1,000. So I would say that, yeah, no, it's highly expensive, and that will all be included in the video that I'll make about it. So I would say that if you're a very busy business person with multiple endeavors, over the age of 35, when you start to notice that thing actually slows down, you're not as strong as you used to be, you're not as cognitive as you used to be, your energy levels start to decline earlier in the day, and you're already on TRT and a couple other things to improve your overall productivity and quality of life. You add the NMN in, you already notice a benefit. And then you're like, oh, okay, this actually works. Let's try some NAD+ on top of that.
What dose of NMN do you find effective personally?
So if it's solo, anywhere between 500 to 1,000 milligrams. If you use 5-amino-1-MQ, which is a nicotinamide N-methyltransferase inhibitor, which I talked about previously on this podcast, and I have a couple dedicated videos on my YouTube channel that inhibits the methylation of nicotinamide. And methylation, of course, makes it inactive. So now there's more nicotinamide available, allowing it to be recycled in the NAD salvage pathway. So it goes from NAD from NR to NMN to NAD, and then nicotinamide again, and then it kind of recycles this way. So if you inhibit the methylation of nicotinamide, there's more nicotinamide available for it to come back into NAD+. So it really depends on what co-drugs you're taking, how much NMN you have to take. So if you take it solo, 500 to 1,000 milligrams per day. If you take it in combination with NAD+, once a week or twice a week, because it does diminish after a couple of days, 3 or 4 days, I feel, then you can half the dose. And if you take 5-amino-1-MQ to prevent the breakdown of nicotinamide or methylation, then you can maybe get away with, 200, 300 milligrams a week, per day, sorry.
Have you seen the drama with David Sinclair lobbying to get the FDA to ban NMN? Pretty sketchy.
Yeah, but he's in the NR field, right?
No, he's NMN, dude.
He's NMN, so he's helping them ban it.
Yeah, right. Well, seemingly, it seems like the company he works with to bring it to market as a pharmaceutical product is actively lobbying the FDA to ban it as a dietary supplement that you can sell, because it's otherwise going to be way cheaper and lower barrier to entry.
It's already very expensive.
Yeah. Didn't they try that with NAC?
Yeah,
they did with NAC, but it's different because there's no party that's benefiting from being able to bring it as a pharmaceutical product to market. And cysteine is also like well established within like the food. I don't know, like it fits DSHEA compliance like more so, I think. And in addition, there's just like no company that has a vested interest in bringing it to market as a pharmaceutical ingredient. So yeah,
plenty of pharmaceutical injectable glutathione available also, so why bother, right? Yeah, but NAD+, that's a bit of a minefield, because I've heard so many different reports that it works, that it doesn't work. It's very difficult to find information about brands, and otherwise they don't really put product placement on the website of the manufacturer. So it's quite. I've gone through 7 different brands here in Thailand, and some felt better than others. Some were compounded in Germany.
What's the best brand that you've used so far?
Man, I can't even remember the name.
Wait, are we talking about NAD IV or
NAD plus? Yeah, NAD plus IV. So I've tried a couple brands of NMN. I tried Life Extension, or that might have been NR. Currently, now I use the one on iHerb, California Gold Nutrition. They're just house brand, and all their products so far have been working quite well. So that's the one I take, 175 milligrams, like 4 times a day, or 5 times sometimes. Yeah, it's quite a lot. Yeah, it's quite a lot.
Like the frequency, though, like I don't even want to. I think I take stuff 3 times a day, and like that feels annoying personally.
Well, I eat 5 times a day, so it's just I have my medicine. Yeah. It's just eat my meal, take my supplements, done. And it's
what are you on right now? Out of curiosity.
Right now,
like just like everything, not like
everything.
Just,
okay,
so
I'm on TRT, testosterone, but it's still quite a high dose. So I'm taking a whole amp of Bayer testosterone, right? So that's 325 milligrams per week. So that's more than TRT. TRT for 2 in 1. And then I recently started HCG because we're going to prepare for kids. So I'll discontinue the testosterone end of February. So this month is like a full amp. Next month is half an amp. And then I'm off. And in the meantime, I'm cycling off most of the PEDs that are not conducive to fertility. So I came off the fluvoxamine and SSRI, which I had great experiences with. The withdrawal is brutal, but it is what it is. So now I'm on test in HCG, and the test is coming down, and then it's coming out, and then the HMG is coming in, and then we're going to alternate that at 1,000 IUs ACG from Ovitrel, so that's recombinant ACG, not urine purified. And I have urine purified HMG, so that's LH and FSH. And then I'll alternate that for about 3 months, do my fertility parameters, and see if I need to switch to recombinant LH and recombinant FSH to get a better signal, So I'll document all of that on my YouTube channel.
Steve has a built-in anticipatory circuit, as Andrew Huberman would say, to this drug. So he doesn't mind multiple frequency, either intramuscular, subcutaneous, or IV. That's why, you said it's inconvenient, to do even IV per week, multiple times per week. Steve has no issues with that whatsoever.
I have no issues. No, but I'm in a bit like, listen, I've been a bodybuilder for 25 years, enhanced over 10. And it's kind of like brushing your teeth, doing administrations. An IV, I have a private nurse that comes to my house. I have all the injectable glutathione, vitamin C, B vitamins, amino acids, EDTA if I want to, curcumin, whatever, choline. I have access to all of that. So that the private nurse comes to my house. I literally sit here with an IV stuck to my arm for an hour, 1.5 hours, and I work. It's very convenient, but I understand that not everybody's going to be in a position like this. They need to go to an IV clinic, or there's not even an IV clinic available, and they wouldn't even benefit from a protocol like this. But I'm kind of set. That's why I came to Thailand. Okay.
Yeah, and
so
also
if
it's not doctors prescribed, or you don't buy it off of the hospital there, which again would require doctor supervision. They're not gonna. You can just walk in and say, in a normal country, in the US, in Canada, which are not normal in this regard. You can't say, just blast this IV. I'm gonna just sit around here and take it.
I do get quite a good amount of PEDs or pharmaceuticals through doctors that I know. So that's a little bit of gray area direction. So it all comes from the clinics or from the pharmacy or online pharmacies.
So is the price of HMG like way cheaper where you are than recombinant?
No, so this I order online. FSH? Just like everybody else, it comes from Turkey, from our biggest best friend, AP. And I sent it over, and it comes through. So I only order it during this winter time when the temperature is a little bit more stable. And I checked a couple times. You do the HMG injection, you go for blood work, you see that your LH and FSH levels are slightly elevated, so you know that it at least has some potency. And that's my protocol going to be. So I'll do that for 3 months, do fertility checks every month, which is annoying. But
so I'm just trying to wrap my head around the justification of HMG over just going to RFSH when you have an HCG. Like, you're competing for Leydig cell activation with the LH in your HMG. So you're relying on the HMG solely for Sertoli cell stimulation, right?
It's purely purely an experiment. There's more data on ACG and HMG alternated because that was the old fertility protocol. And you got to remember that recombinant LH and recombinant FSH has not been around that long. So there's less data to pull from and way more expensive than alternating ACG and HMG. It's stupid expensive. So let's try it the easy way first, where people can actually do research and can follow through in a more affordable way. And if that doesn't work for me, okay, then we go to a more extreme route with more expensive drugs, less clinical evidence to pull from, and then we'll figure it out I'll figure it out myself, just like I always has, because we're setting like 6 to 9 months for this timeline. And again, I don't mind to come off and shrink down, and because I know the muscularity will come back, and all I gain is more knowledge during this period. So it's not the end of the world.
If it's the case that you're concerned about, because I know you're talking about coming off of TRT though, which presumably the only benefit of that is potential concern of epigenetic changes that may come from exposure to synthetic androgens in the body. So if that is a concern too, would it not be worthwhile to, because again, HCG is not LH, it's an LH mimic. So wouldn't that be a concern too, as opposed to just using HMG if it's purified, bioidentical, not recombinant LH and FSH, as opposed to RFSH? Because it's like the actual most natural thing, similar to if you had like a full spectrum, like kilodalton variant of HGH, as opposed to like a 22, which is what all of the commercial grade products are. Like using an HMG at a dose that otherwise adequately stimulates Leydig cells and Sertoli cells, would that not be like the most natural way to stimulate, as opposed to using like an LH mimic, which isn't even LH, and then recombinant FSH as well? I don't know. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Your urine purified HMG also contains HCG.
Right.
It's purified, but it's not that purified. So even if I were to take the HCG out, I still get HCG from the HMG, because it's urine purified. And in urine of pregnant women, there's a boatload of HCG. So
I thought it was just a small amount, though, in contrast to the actual purified FSH and LH component.
I think it goes up to the thousands of IUs sometimes.
No, I don't know, man. Let me show you this study here. One second.
Sure.
I mean, where do you draw the line with trying to not interfere with the epigenetics? And also, how big of a break does one need to take in order to really make a difference?
Yeah, this is where like I start to wonder if it's worth coming off of TRT when you're adequately stimulating the cells you need to be stimulating. Like, am I at that point? Is it like, well, I don't know. It's so I don't really know how much exogenous test in my blood is affecting the.
But if the HMG is producing like 900 nanograms per deciliter, that's basically the same as TRT, right? Because these fertility drugs, right, they really stimulate the testicles to produce testosterone. Intertesticular testosterone levels really shoot up, and then you have the FSH and the intertesticular testosterone that produce semen in the Sertoli cells. So
check the chat.
And that will also increase total and free testosterone regardless. So that could be an alternative.
Where is it? In WhatsApp? Where did you put it?
I put it in StreamYard. Is that it says private chat with everyone in the studio?
All right, I got it.
Wouldn't the same apply for Enclomiphene as realization as HRT? Same principle.
The problem with Enclomiphene is that there's not so much data on it, right? There's a lot of information on Clomid, which contains Zuclomiphene, which is where we all get the side effects from.
Right.
All right, let me read this. Derek wanted to say something about the Enclomiphene, so please go ahead.
Well, it's like at that point I would then wonder, okay, well, like what if we were going to go that deep? It's like, what epigenetic changes then happen if you're depriving yourself of adequate estrogen receptor activation or whatever? Like, there's I don't know at what point it's like too much to be. I don't know. Like, I feel like a lot of guys might be f***ing their quality of life coming off of TRT to try and restore fertility with like SERMs and I don't know.
Yeah, and other negative.
That's why I don't want to use SERMs.
I don't know why this link isn't like you're gonna have to copy and paste the full thing because it's just
I'm running through it. I'm just seeing how much. I can't really find how much IUs of HCG is present in.
And how long do you have to run this though in order to be sure that what you did prior, the epigenetic changes at that time are finished, and then you're clear from everything you've done prior. Like, what's the time frame?
The epigenetic changes you don't really know. What I do know is how long it takes for testosterone to clear. Right, so that's why I'm tapering down. So by February, the testosterone is tapered down. Then, because it's castor oil, it might still take 2 or 3 months before all the testosterone is gone. Now, of course, how much testosterone is going to suppress when it's like 4 nanograms per deciliter, and the rest, the other 600, is coming from the testicles, I think that's going to be a non-issue. I do know that it takes about 3 months for the Sertoli cells to produce sperm, and then it's ready for ejaculation. I believe it was like 78 days for semen to mature, and then 11 days for it to transport to the seminal vesicles in the prostate. Okay, so it takes 3 months. So I wanted to wait at least 3 months after this fertility protocol just to check my fertility, and then wait another 3 months. So I have like super fresh sperm that's not produced with any exogenous testosterone in the picture before we actually start conceiving based on, you know, ovulation and all that stuff. And honestly, we're not going to use a stopwatch because it puts pressure on it. So we're just going to go every day until I see 2 lines on the pregnancy strip. You know,
what kind of dietary and lifestyle changes is your wife making, though? Because you're making all this compromise and sacrifice, right? Is she on any protocol?
No, so she hasn't touched anything since her competitive days. Yeah, no comment there. Drug tested shows. So she hasn't touched anything since. Yeah, a little bit, of course. I do know a thing or two about beating the drug test. So she hasn't touched anything since, and she checked her eggs twice since then, and they're perfectly healthy. You know, she doesn't take any weird medications. She eats healthy. So I think she'll have a longer trajectory, because during the time that I come off, she's going to go into this low inflammation diet, right? And then do, you know, treatments and that kind of stuff just to make sure that everything is healthy. And I'll do the same. You know, injectable glutathione, for example, which I already started, that helps tremendously with motility because it's such a potent antioxidant. Like a lot of oxidative stress on the semen is just lifestyle. So people who smoke have worse morphology and motility. People who drink, same story. People who take recreational drugs, same story. So all that will be out, never smoked and occasional drinking. And same for her. So you basically live this super squeaky clean lifestyle until breastfeeding stops. And then you can, you know, kind of ease back a little bit. So that's months to years. So
are you going to have her supplement with stuff like taurine, carnitine, creatine, etc., or just full natty?
I'll have to look into that, because it's so convoluted to that field. You know, before you know it, like there's all these prenatal vitamins, and many of these prenatal vitamins you can get from food. So I'd rather have her eat healthy and you know, eat high quality food, not processed.
Aren't you worried with glutathione injections that you would downregulate your natural ability to produce more glutathione naturally? So wouldn't you say that taking precursors like NAC or NAC-ethyl ester would be a wiser choice?
That's what I would do personally.
Like I'd rather give the body the building blocks to synthesize the final product than give it, you know, the final product and potentially, you know, trigger a desynthesization.
Glutathione sketches me out because of that, dude. Knowing it's like, I've looked at my polymorphisms.
That's why I wouldn't use it.
Like in my the genomic sequencing, and seeing some of my like deficiencies in producing glutathione, and I'm just like, what does that look like if I'm manually administering some amount that I don't know if it's reaching threshold like antioxidant levels, and then even if it does, or I'm going above it, am I having negative feedback on some system that could otherwise atrophy or have deficiency in function down the line, or enzymatic downregulation or whatever. Right. Whereas if I have like just enough cysteine in my diet and or NAC supplementation, etc., like I would at least be a bit more confident that I'm at least like backloading the pathway correctly. But that's like hard to quantify, so I don't really know.
So you can quantify with semen analysis, because the morphology and the motility goes down when you're not taking injectable glutathione. And I was on NAC 2,000 milligrams for years, ever since it first came out. You read all the evidence, you're like, okay, this I need mandatory year-round in my supplement stack. So whereas before I would not take ACG, I will take NAC and you know, do moderate cycles or full blasts. And then on a TRT dose, my semen parameters were, I was not azoospermic, so I would still have 22 million, but the morphology was horrendous and the motility was horrendous. That's with NAC in the picture, but on steroids. Now I've been doing injectable glutathione for almost a year, if not longer. And now my motility and morphology with HCG in the picture, maintenance dose, 250 IUs 3 times per week. Morphology and motility is basically bottom of acceptable ranges, which is okay. And the semen amount is like over 60 million per 1 milliliter. So that's 3 times higher than it was before. And that's on cycle. But I have HCG in the picture. So this is why I've been using HCG and injectable glutathione for the last year, or if not longer, because I wanted my semen parameters to have a good starting point for when I wanted to come off and get my wife pregnant. So at least now I know that instead of needing 9 months for my morphology and motility to come back and getting decent semen parameters overall, which took 9 months the last time I came off. That's why I was off for such a long time. Now I think I only need 3 months, but I probably still wait 6 months just to play it safe.
So if you were going to do IM shots of glutathione for like
IV.
Preservation, okay, I know, but let's just say if you're me and don't want to do it IV, what would an IM protocol look like in your opinion? Because again, it's pretty
1800 milligrams 3 times a week. That's
how many milligrams?
Dose. 1800 milligrams 3 times per week. But the problem is, yeah, it's very high. That's the one that really showed differences in morphology. But those are in people who are kind of unhealthy. It's the same with NAFLD, right? 1800 milligrams glutathione 3 times per week. IV really improves states of NAFLD. So when I had NAFLD, I used injectable glutathione as well to fix that. But that was not for long enough time to really improve my morphology and motility levels in the semen parameters. So I would say that if you want to do intramuscular, the problem is that it has a pro-oxidant effect at the site of administration, potentially. So if you inject 4 milliliters, which is 600 milligrams, most pharmaceutical glutathione formulations are 600 milligrams per 4 milliliter, that's a pretty high injection volume. And that's only one site that you need to do 9 times a week.
But they're water-based, right? So
yeah,
you can. Yeah. So people they do cerebrolizing. They would do like even upwards of 10 ml per injection without any problems with dispersation.
Cerebrolizing is the smoothest injection I'll ever do. When you inject glutathione, that one you will feel. That's like Winstrol. That
oh, really? So it hurts.
It goes, oh, yeah, it hurts. Yeah, it's same
what
as
about
IV.
PIP?
Go ahead.
Did you have PIP like even the next day?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's not.
I would imagine you'd have like if you're trying to do 4 milliliters and you're not using like a 1.5 inch at least and burying it in like.
So when just like a gray 1.5 inch needle that's at like 30 or 31. I have very thin ones for water based, so it's literally the size of a pin, and it's a little bit flexible, so you can't sneeze; it will break off when you sneeze when you're injecting. So you inject that minimal scar tissue, inject, and oh man! And that's
have you guys ever been worried about snapping a needle during Tren cough? That's like one of the sketchiest things.
I take it out. I took it out every time. When you feel that trickle in the back of your neck, you're like, oh, this is not going to happen to me. You take it out.
When it's always like the split second decision of like, do I finish or do I pull it out? You're like, can I get it done in time before I start hacking up the lung and just like flying all over the fucking place?
When I used Tren, I knew about Ventolin, which is a beta agonist. So people with asthma use it. And I just would use that, and it would dilate, my lungs, and it completely stops at least for me the Tren cough, like instantly. Yeah. Instantly.
Would you take it before pinning, or only when you get the cough?
I used to do it before, but the frequency that I got the cough was like rare. I didn't get it quite as often as other people. Some get it every time. So I switched to just whenever I feel the onset of it, and I would do it, and I would feel immediate evolution. Like instantly. Yeah. So that was like basically the Tren cough cure.
So would you finish your pin though and then do it? Or would you be like
inhaler
one hand?
The other? Yeah, inhaler here, injecting it. I feel it come up, doing 2 times. If it's not enough, doing 3 times. I'm good, finish the shot, and then I'm good to go. And then sometimes I overdo it and I have like tachycardia for the next 3 hours, and I'm like shaking. Plus from the Tren itself, because I feel it instantly. So
imagine how absurd that would look walking in on somebody trying to pin Tren and like avoid the cough, and they're just like,
that's the thumbnail right there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, but it's better. It's better than walking in somebody on somebody that's like jumping into the bathtub and pouring his head, with water. Because I had a friend do that. I
Yeah.
injected him with Tren, and he panicked so badly he ran to my bathrooms, jumped into the bathtub, and poured himself with cold water, and he was like
That
shaking
helps
like
you
this.
not cough? Like, why would you
No, I
do
don't
that?
know. It was just panicking, but it's like a
I thought you were
fucking
gonna say he was like overeating from DNP or something. You're like,
No,
it took
it was just his reaction, but it's even funny to picture that because I saw that in real life. And once he was done, he was said, "Okay, let's do the other one," because he had like
He said,
he had 4 cc's in 2 syringes.
Macedonians always have the weirdest stories about gear.
Yeah, bro. It's probably because they're also using a lot of recreational drugs, and that's why they later on get side effects, like the dude with the heart failure from Deca. First cycle, Deca anadrol gets a heart attack.
Yeah, but that's that kind of stuff is worldwide. This guys you never hear about, only in your local circle, because they're not on social media and they just mess up. And here in Thailand also, like I know of like 15 to 70 Thai bodybuilders that died, over the last 15 years that have been here. So every year around one of these bigger shows, it's another one dies, because it took insulin with diuretics or whatever, and their blood potassium levels go zero. And it's
really
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that happens. Usually, insulin helps in that situation when somebody has, either hyperkalemia. They shoot insulin to shuttle it into the cells, and that saves them. Usually, when they go when the doctor comes and they do an IV infusion with electrolytes, that's how they can potentially keep themselves with inducing even further hyperkalemia and stopping their heart.
But
so that's dangerous.
And then, so they take Lasix and insulin together, and then they get hypokalemia. And then they die also. So, that's a common occurrence over here in Asia. Yeah, that they're not very knowledgeable. Dude, every world championships I went to, guys would get picked up with ambulance.
I think if
pissed off every time.
If you need diuretics and to do really shit at the end of your prep, like the final day pre-show or on show day, I think you just wasn't ready. Because if you're really on, there's nothing really you can do to screw it up. Like, it's probably safer to pay the safeguard rather than to shoot for a 10%, betterment.
There's something to say for, like, you have a bodybuilder and everything falls into place, and in the morning of the show you want to fill them out a little bit, and then after you fill them out with insulin, and then you see a little film of water, you IV a little bit of Lasix, so that's 20 milligrams. Oh man, and then they look like a statue. They go on, they walk off. You get the big hug, covered in Dream Tan, because they knew they won. I've been there many, many times before, but you need to be there in person, not online. You can't do this online coaching. You need to be there in person and have your little medical bag in your fanny pack ready. Said, you need a little bit. Let's go to the bathroom.
But what big of a difference? Like, is it going from fourth to first, or is it like risk reward ratio wise? Like, when does it warrant such an intervention?
Because you got to remember the pictures. Like, these people at the World Championships, they would fly from all kinds of countries to compete in another country, which is the host event.
I'm here to watch them quick. What do you guys finish?
Yeah, sure. So winning is not difficult because the competition is not that deep at the World Championships, unless it's a couple classes, right? A couple classes are very, very good competitors, so they're hard to beat. They've been there for years, and they're phenomenal. They own that weight class. But sometimes these guys, they know they're going to win, but they want to have the pictures to show for back home as well. Because when you go to Iran, for example, or these small countries, dude, they represent the country and they get, they come back as heroes. And when they get to the professional photography, those pictures, life size or building size in the gym. So you have to be extra peeled, because those pictures they will use forever. So they're like, you know what, I'm good enough to win, but I need the high quality video and stuff. And some teams would have their own videographers with red cameras. I had no idea how they afforded 4K red cameras, and they would just film that stuff, And it's,
but those guys, from what I've seen, if you look at in India or Iran, they train significantly harder, diet significantly harder. Like, I saw a video of Hadi Chopin post Olympia.
He's crazy.
And he was sitting with Henry Rambo. They were all eating, and he had grapefruit and another piece of fruit, and he was smiling. He was so happy because he gets to eat more fruit. He wasn't eating pizza or shit like that. I think he's that brainy and conditioned because he's different. The discipline is different because it's they're representing their country. I think they have a greater degree of motivation because they have, a bigger fan base and, a culture and a country to represent. It's not just about themselves. And those people are not active on social media. They're not, they're not the
usually they're
social media influencers.
Usually they're very low key. So yeah, these guys represent their country, but they're also subject to drug testing, whether that's the IFBB World Championships or the WBPF. So they'd rather just be low key athletes. And then, once a year, twice a year, Asian World Championships, they have a nice payday because most of these governments paid quite well. And then they show up, they take a picture, they don't do social media, they stay off it. They don't want to talk with guys about drugs because they have to keep up appearances.
How big of a
but they don't sell a pipe dream and supplements in that area either. So
how big of a payday are we talking about? Because when you look at this social media shows where they give awards and somebody would get mad and just like kick the fruit mixer or they give refrigerators some silly silly prices.
I've never seen that at the World Championships. I've seen people very angry, but never in that raging mode that Derek would make a video about, like, this is great content. Yeah, Derek, I would. So I've never seen that myself, but I have seen people who are extremely disgruntled. So, for example, I think my wife, she would make $1 million baht at the World Championships. So that's
what's that in US dollars?
About $33,000.
What?
That's good.
Yeah,
that's close to what Bumstead makes.
Yeah, isn't that like a better than like figure and like?
It's better because it comes from the government and it's tax free. So she would get 1 million netto.
So more than Bumstead. Because I think he was like what 50,000. 50,000.
Bumstead is doing Merville with his supplements in his YouTube channel, so he doesn't
no,
an extra 50K. That's change compared to his big overall brand. So, but for her, like, there's no fitness or YouTube or whatever opportunity. So she was like, okay, this is the best opportunity to make some extra money and get my name out there. Let's go for it. So 400,000 at the Asian Championships and then $1 million at the World Championships. And then around a year, they retroactively reduced the prize money because the Olympics were there. And then the Olympic athletes complained that, hey, the Olympics is only every 4 years. But the World Championships and all these events, they're every year. So why do they get comparable pricing? So they cut the prize money down quite significantly to a fourth. Disgusting.
During that phase... During that period, didn't this motivate you to jump in and do a show? Because you've been jacked out of your mind, out of your goddamn tree, as Derek would say.
It's different for each country. So Holland would not represent you. Or you can represent Holland, but they would not support you. They were like, it's my ass. You will not get any of the tax dollars to represent the country. No. But in Thailand, they love it. Iran, they love it. Bhutan. Listen, all these countries here, they would treat their athletes very, very good. But it's usually the federation that kind of, all the politics and drama that just ruined it after a while.
That's everywhere.
So a lot of drama in that sense. So after a while, we just got tired of it, and it was no longer, interesting because the prize money was slashed in 4. And even though she could do 2 classes now, like you do, bikini and then senior bikini, so you get 2 classes, still the prize money is only half. And then when they start placing you, with politics, you get second place. And it's like, okay, never mind. We'll try another avenue to make money. But yeah, she made millions of bahts competing. So that's hundreds of thousands of dollars competing as a bikini competitor. She did very well for herself. Yeah, I made her invest all of it.
In what? Bitcoin?
Amongst other things, Bitcoin, stock, the house,
but
of course, of her money, and then. Yeah.
And Gorilla Mind.
Yeah.
Bought shares in Gorilla Mind.
But a co-owner in Gorilla Mind. So, no, she invested the majority of it, and those are all appreciating. So, whatever that is worth now, it's substantially more.
That's good for sure.
Yeah.
Back to your protocol. I want to stay on. I want to finish that section off because I think this is good info to know. HCG and what we would do if we could go back in time to prior to shutting ourselves down and hormone use. I was always under the impression, because this is what went through the grapevine, that it didn't matter what you did. You could have as much toxicity around your testicles as you want. You could be shut down for years, and it wouldn't matter because eventually you could just do a fertility protocol and get back to fertile state in short order, which you can get to a fertile state in short order for some people, for sure. But some others we've seen that, it's a bit harder than it may be for the next guy. So if you were to go back in time, what would you do from a fertility standpoint and a preservation of it from day one, if you could?
I personally started off like that.
I started with fake Instagram model and just run test and HCG. And that's it. No. So if I were to go back, I would omit all the progestogenic 19-nors, never touch Tren, never touch Nandrolone, maybe 50, 100 milligrams a week. I never touched mint, but I would forgo that. I would forgo a lot of the orals. Basically, the short list would be Test, Primo, Anavar, GH, Insulin, and maybe some exotics, and just keep the overall oxidative stress as low as possible. Take all the vitamins which are known to support testicular function, vitamin E, taurine, magnesium, etc. And then keep HCG in there, because HCG doesn't really work when you take Trenbolone or Nandrolone at higher dosages, or mint, right? I mean, it's designed to be a male contraceptive anyway, which it was not successful, but the studies were quite short. I mean, run 600 milligrams of mint for a year. Let's see how fertile you are.
Why would you say that about Nandrolone?
Yeah, so it's just extra progestogenic downregulation through the progesterone receptor. So, and the problem is, if you do want to come off, right, it stays in your system such a long time that PCT is more difficult or lengthier.
But you would probably be fully shut down with HCG and test in the picture anyways, right? So like at that point, do you think the progestogenic activity is neurotoxic, cardiotoxic, above and beyond what you would get from an equivalent amount
I think through the progesterone receptor on the testicles, you probably get downregulation locally, whereas you're trying to promote that with HCG, but you get downregulation through a different pathway. So forget about the hypothalamus pituitary signaling to the testes, because you're fulfilling part of that. I think locally, there's just an effect. And again, not really a lot of scientific evidence to back that up, because of the polypharmacy has never been studied in that sense. I just see that, from all my years working with people, you take Nandrolone at a hefty dose, an off-season dose, and HCG, besides all the estrogenic effects that are going to happen, fertility doesn't really come up or improve or change much. You do a PCT, you start HCG and HMG, it still takes months for fertility to improve. But for the guys that never ran, progestogenic 19-nors, it seems to be not an issue.
What about Nandrolone solo, though? Because I've seen a lot of people use NPP, not the decanoate, ester NPP solo cycles, and then once pulling that off and doing a pretty extensive PCT. And when I say extensive, I mean just HCG with on top of a serum in conjunction with here and there microdoses of aromasin, because it's also it also increases androgenicity directly, and also additionally boosts testosterone levels. They do that and they recover significantly better than other cycles, because Nandrolone is less androgenic than testosterone and many other androgens. So doesn't that equate to have some benefits in that regard? Because also you preserve your hair, your skin. There's less androgenic burden overall on your body. Taking aside the neurological components, because that's a different story. We're just talking about recovery. Recovery standpoint.
Yeah, so I mean, personally, I've never really dived much into the Nandrolone only cycle. I've tried it, but that was not. I didn't do research in the context of fertility, and that was not on my mind during that time at all. I wasn't even using HCG. Let's see.
How long was your cycle, the Nandrolone solo? Because I did research on that, and the reason why I stopped using
2 cycles, about 8 weeks, both in duration.
Of decanoate?
Decanoate. Yeah.
Okay. I stopped using Nandrolone solo simply because I researched my autoimmune and it has a profound effect in upregulating inflammatory cytokines. Interleukin 2, 6, 8 prevents the production of interleukin 10, which is an anti-inflammatory cytokine. So for people with autoimmune, there's a study that it can exacerbate the effects of the manifestation of lupus, which is what I have. So I think from that perspective, it's worse. But for people that are, trying to preserve, their hair, their skin, and overall not overly androgenize themselves, I think still it's a feasible way to go.
Yeah. If I could go back in time, I would. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just reading it to you guys talk.
To me, it looks like progesterone receptor expression is, now again, this could just be correlation, not causation or whatever, but it is, at least in this, showing to be supportive progesterone receptor expression in the testicles themselves. But this is among 18 infertile men, and I don't know, like how much can you really extrapolate out from that?
So that's why, when you start researching into fertility, I started researching SSRIs, and when you look at SSRIs as a whole, okay, it's commonly known that they're not good for fertility. And then you look into fluvoxamine, and there's like 5 studies. So why take the risk? Just take it out.
I guess one of the best ways you could actually figure out how bad something like a nandrolone or some of these like Tren or whatever, again, it's not directly comparable, but looking at what happens to women who take progestin-based oral contraceptives for long periods of time, like if they have adequate progesterone receptor expression through endogenous progesterone production, what does that do versus if you're using a synthetic progestin that is literally derived from nandrolone? What effect does that have on the body? Is it just because obviously these are progestins that still interact with the same receptor, yet have all of these negative consequences associated with them, aside from negative feedback related stuff, where it's just like actually causing contraception and the uterine lining and whatnot.
Yeah, but
above and beyond. Go ahead.
Those are also anti-androgens in the sense where compared to DECA, which is anabolic and it's an androgen, it's a different outcome. That's why when you did the nandrolone solo, you didn't feel the side effects that a woman on birth control get, which is a completely different story. So
I'm trying to evaluate the effects like locally on like sperm quality.
Oh, okay. On sperm quality, that's different. Well, we can.
It's like obviously we know that we've seen like the studies on taurine and making it easier to retain fertility and exposure to nandrolone or whatever. I forget what that study was, but there is like for me when I'm trying to evaluate, like I feel like this conversation kind of tangented from me just talking about HCG from the beginning, which is probably what I would have done personally to preserve fertility or preserve testicular function at least. And we've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of like, should you even touch some of these more exotic compounds that don't interact with just the androgen receptor primarily? So I don't know, like with nandrolone, I just think extrapolating out from some of the progestin-based contraceptive data, you can see that it does stuff other than just interact with AR, PR, and have some of these.
Why risk it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that I think it could have, like you mentioned, it could have direct like toxicity related effects, like intratesticularly, that maybe don't come from some of these more like a bioidentical testosterone.
But also you can make the argument for any compound that's not that's not as a testosterone. That's the problem because all of these androgens, they have different different cellular transcription, different signaling, different receptor affinity. So they all bind to the androgen receptor, but where? So, on paper we see drugs that are very low androgenic, yet they cause havoc on one's hair, on one's prostate, and you see others completely different stories. So we can't really know what's actually going on a cellular level. Same thing with as we talked about insulin and growth hormone, their interaction on a cellular level. It's not just on the receptor one. It's the downstream cascade, what's going on, what's happening, and even the JAK-STAT pathway that I mentioned with growth hormone interfering with insulin transcription, that also plays a huge role in immune system function. So what would that happen? What would that do if we constantly agonize the gynase kinase pathway and etc. So we don't really know if we really want to play the safe card. Don't use anything else out of testosterone and with HCG, and call it a day, and maybe throw in some NMN here and there for specific purposes.
What would you do from day one? Would you do HCG from the beginning too?
I actually did it. When I started, I wrote down my first cycle on a piece of paper, and I started with pharmaceutical tests. I had HCG, I had aromas because you had to have an AI. I had Nandrolone because we could get that in the pharmacy, the 50 milligrams from Organon. So I continued that practice with HCG, but then I fell into the trap of, you see all these pros, they all have kids. They have kids while they're in contest prep. And, I was 18 years old. I was under the assumption then, okay, I maybe don't need the HCG. And I also was scared of increasing estrogenic activity because I was, very prone to estrogen. And I was scared of, having like these spikes where I may induce gyno or anything like that, or even induce a telogenic effluvium because I was prone to shedding at that point. And sometimes when administered, because people here, when they do PCT, they just slam 5,000 units of HCG. And foolishly, when I did that once, I induced a telogen effluvium, which, costed me 90 days of, having, a lot of hair gone from my scalp. We talked about this with Derek, because I think one of your concerns with HCG was that as well, whether it can induce a telogenic effluvium or not.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception around what the effective dose of HCG is too. So a lot of people do induce it accidentally when it turns out the data suggests that I've seen that, first of all, everyone thinks when you take TRT, you just maintain fertility, you be fine. And then some people think that it's literally birth control, and it's neither. It's likely that you will end up with I think it's 90+% intratesticular testosterone reduction pretty relatively quickly, and sperm count, motility, morphology goes way down too in a relatively
single digit milligrams or almost undetectable. That's for most guys, but there's so much that contributes to that. Lifestyle is a huge factor. If you're living in a cold climate or a hot climate, what is the temperature of your testicles, right? All these little things contribute. So it's very hard to say that it's just the testosterone that lowers fertility, and HCG raises it. So I'm just trying to attack it from all angles, going forward.
Steve mentioned the intranasal testosterone, the Nesta one, right? And when I did research, how it affects fertility, because the whole idea was you take it multiple times throughout the day to mimic, natural pulsing. And as a consequence, they hypothesize that it may not impact fertility and HPTA function. But turns out that, the subject at even 3 months in the experiment, 38% had, a drop of LH and FSH way below reference range. And 4 of them, out of 44 subjects, had complete osteospermia. So
it's you wouldn't even be able to achieve the effect you're trying to get out of it if it wasn't interacting with the receptors that cause that. But anyway, before we get to that, I still haven't said the dose of HCG that maintains intratesticular testosterone. From what I can tell, it seems to be around the 250 IU every other day dose, subcutaneous. You have a drop of, at baseline, if you're on TRT, you can attenuate the drop to only go -7%, is what the study I've seen shows. If you took 500 IU of HCG every other day, you would actually have a 26% increase above baseline intratesticular testosterone production, even on TRT. So the dose probably somewhere in the ballpark of 300 EOD subcutaneous that I've seen personally. And it is 250. So I'm in the neighborhood of 275 to 300 every other day right now on top of my base TRT is what I just started recently.
I like that Derek is slowly getting into this adult phase where these things start to matter more than hair loss. Because remember we talked about this 2 or 3 years ago. And you're like, no, man, I'm not touching this stuff.
Yeah, but I also I had more misconceptions about what to consider that came along with that. Because again, it's good.
Why not do HCG daily though? Because you do it every other day. Why not even make it an even better,
Yeah, I was doing it daily, but it's I only have so much tolerance. and the half-life is like what, 23 hours or something?
Yeah.
And with sub-Q,
Yeah, so
it stays in your system quite long. And you would actually want this in a pulsatile fashion, just like your body produces. So instead of hammering it every day, you have stable serum concentrations. You actually want a little bit of peak and valleys for the
31
sensitivity,
hours.
potentially.
Maybe. Yeah, you could
sensitivity.
definitely argue because it's in a pulsatile manner that would be beneficial. But yeah, for me, it's mainly, in an ideal world, I would be doing my TRT on a daily basis, but lately I've been doing EOD because I think it's diminishing returns above EOD. Once you go to ED, you're kind of like, how much more stability are you really getting? Like some, but it's like typically I would reserve that for guys who otherwise like need an AI or have like extreme hypersensitivity. I don't see the benefit as significant as dropping from like a twice a week to EOD or like once a week guys going to 2 or 3 times a week. Like those guys see like a big difference typically. But for me, EOD has been fine so far. And I'm doing that for my tirzepatide dose. I actually haven't mentioned that I'm doing that as well. So Mounjaro, it's not actually Mounjaro, it's like generic tirzepatide from a compounding pharmacy, but it is a long half-life drug as well that you could otherwise take in a mega dose once a week, which I think a lot of people do with GLP-1 agonists. And then when they get side effects, they could have otherwise, it's like, because GLP-1 agonists are so new, people are not even considering the pharmacokinetics like they are of like the people who are taking it think of it differently than their hormones for some reason that they're taking, even in the bodybuilding fitness world. So they'll slam like semaglutide or tirzepatide like full dose on Monday, potentially get nauseated and think they can't tolerate it, but then they could otherwise be splitting it into micro administrations to achieve like a similar effect to how do you attenuate the aromatization spike from testosterone or the DHT, that kind of thing could still be applied to any drug just the same to achieve more stable blood serum concentration. So for me, I figured to get a more stable effect out of it, I'm doing every other day of tirzepatide right now.
I really wonder how would that impact your appetite in comparison to semaglutide, because this is a dual incretin, which those are hormones that facilitate a drop in blood sugar, right, while stimulating insulin and or inhibiting glucagon. So in this case, we have a GIP mimetic and a GLP-1 agonist. So it does what semaglutide does plus effects on GIP. But I wonder, because semaglutide has a greater affinity for the GLP-1 receptor than tirzepatide, and that the GLP-1 directly inhibits the HRP neurons, which induce polyphagia and orexogenic effect. So I suspect that semaglutide should have a greater effect as far as appetite decrease, even though in studies tirzepatide outperformed semaglutide from a perspective of overall body weight loss relative to the the dose. I think even they compared it to 1 milligram of semaglutide rather than 2.
It was 5. It took 5 milligrams of tirzepatide to match or slightly beat what a full 2.4 milligram dose of Wegovy semaglutide does.
From a perspective of HbA1c reduction and body weight, or is there appetite mentioned anywhere? Because that's what we would be.
It was by percentage weight lost.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
which I think downstream is kind of like the metric by which I would kind of like, obviously, if you want to get into like the proportion of lean body mass, blah, blah, but it's like ultimately these people are not eating. Yeah. Whatever the quality was, it's kind of like more of a personal choice than anything. But I think the weight loss is kind of like all the downstream hemoglobin A1C, all that kind of stuff, blood pressure reductions are going to be subsequent to that. So as long as you're tolerating it, whatever tolerable dose you can get to achieve better weight loss would kind of be, and then whichever one doesn't have weird satellite side effects like rare cancers, which GLP seems to be associated somewhat with potentially. So I don't know if the dual effect you're getting through GIP and GLP-1 is like a way to otherwise get a 1 + 1 = 3 effect versus semaglutide might be like they obviously work extremely well, both of them, but it's like, as far as I think tirzepatide is not like a strong GLP-1 agonist.
No, I recall. It has 2 times greater affinity for GIP rather than GLP-1. That's why I said, semaglutide would.
it kind of begs the question, like when you have multiple mechanisms of action, but at a lower stimulatory input of each, are you achieving a better tolerable outcome because you're not overloading one pathway too significantly? Like it would kind of
sounds like steroids and growth hormone together, low dose.
Yeah, maybe.
Right. That's basically what it is. So you get the inhibitory effect of the secretion of the gastric acid, the stomach acid. So actually, the food stays longer in your stomach. That's what a lot of people note. A little bit of different kinds of nausea with this Mounjaro, the tirzepatide over semaglutide, which is just hammering the GLP-1. And again, it depends on the dose, and you do build a little bit of a tolerance to GLP-1s.
I can say
liraglutide after a while just stops working.
Yeah, I've tried
like you just didn't.
Holy shit. I've tried liraglutide, semaglutide. I think doula. No, I did do doula. I think, but it was
the big pen, right? This one-time administer. I mean, it looks like.
I don't think I gave it like a fair shot, but anyways, I just like that was after I got access to semaglutide. I was like, I can use dulaglutide anymore. So I tried Lira, and then which was like the short half-life one, which I think is like the probably smart entry into the GLP-1 agonist, territory. Because it's like if you respond terribly, like good fucking luck getting this thing out of your system in like a month. You're gonna be sitting around feeling like dumb. And then semaglutide I tried, and now on tirzepatide I am only taking about 3 milligrams a week, which is lower than, well, I guess it's something 5 milligrams of tirzepatide is as strong as 2.4 milligrams sema, which is like the max dose. But I've taken 2.4 of semaglutide too, and I find so far tirzepatide works better for me.
In what regard?
That's what I've heard as well. That's what I've heard anecdotal. I haven't had a chance to try
appetite suppression and satiety. So, and I don't really get side effects from either. Objectively, from a nausea aspect, obviously I can't speak to thyroid cancer, but let's hope no. So I will.
It's some people with full blown type 2 diabetes already, and then they get prescribed this. So whatever their eating habits were previously, you don't really know how much that contributes into the side effects.
By the way, for anyone using GLP-1s in like, I think what would be the most worthwhile way to screen thyroid issues? Would it be to have a baseline ultrasound of your thyroid as well as a hormone panel to assess TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse,
I think there's a couple of cancer markers that are related to the thyroid. Let me look those up real quick.
So if you want, I think Merrick Health has a thyroid panel already. Let me just
anti-TPO,
thyroid peroxidase antibodies.
Yeah. But in general, before the thyroid has structural changes, you have to note some form of hormonal alterations, like elevation TSH, T4, T3, or antibodies, anti-TPO, etc. There has to be something going on in the body before there is a structural change in the organ itself, and this goes for anything. The kidneys, the prostate, whatever. Like you just have to catch it early on, and address it before it takes the full blown toll on you.
Yeah. But anyways, instead of flying blind, instead of flying blind, get blood work.
Yeah, through miracle.
Get blood work. Do it every year.
That's why even they had the HCG diet. If you remember a few years ago, even doctors were like, "Oh, this is good for weight loss. Use HCG," and they called it the HCG diet. This was a trend actually a few years ago.
I think that's why it got. I think that's why it got classified as a biologic by the government. Because the HCG diet, the expectations around it.
It does have some merits because, like a 500-calorie diet, that will downregulate your hormone production, your endocrine system quite substantially. So this was just a way to mitigate that. And then, of course, you have a 7-keto DHEA, which does act on metabolism to a certain extent. So if you keep that high, your metabolic rate should potentially stay higher. But like direct effect on the thyroid stimulating hormone, I think that's greatly exaggerated. But sometimes that's all we have, right? Sometimes rat studies or in vitro studies is all we have. Like studying fluvoxamine, there's no human studies regarding fluvoxamine and fertility in humans. So you do the best you can with that and other SSRIs, and then just make a decision. I could continue to run it, but why take the freaking risk? You know,
when you're doing all this shit to be extra careful.
Imagine if you take growth hormone together and HCG, and you would never have to touch T4. That would be great, huh? But that everybody still needs to take T4 in that protocol.
When you mention this, even just thinking it logically, just science aside, when you modulate your neurotransmitter in a way where you have serotonin in abundance, whether that's in the endocrine system, just one hormone in abundance in the nervous system with serotonergic activity, like that will impact what you're transferring into your wife, because like that's basically a chronic state that you're in. So there's no way that can have any impact, on what goes downstream.
Everything. So basically, everything that's supraphysiological for me, I'm going to take out. So I shouldn't be even part of this podcast anymore 2 months from now, because
you're the natural man.
Average. Yeah, I'm the natural guy out. I'll wear two.
I don't know if anyone does anything super physiological here. Now that I think about it, do we?
I do. I'm on 325 tests.
Oh well, you do. You do.
1,000 HCG. Dude, my nuts are
right.
This Ovitrol stuff is
I'm at the threshold of super physiological, but not quite there.
What, you're like 140 still?
I do 110 milligrams of test right now, and then like 275 HCG every other day, and then
how much test?
110 milligrams.
So you brought your test down, right? To add the HCG.
Yeah, but it's also
so responsible, Derek.
Only a little bit though, because I don't know yet that it's like I'm as responsive as I hope to be. Because
you've been shut down for a while, right? So you might, it might take a while before you really start responding. Keep in mind that 500 IUs.
At Derek. Right? Derek, where's your test level set at this dose? Have you tested it?
Let me check my last blood test. But my last blood test was on I think 125 milligrams.
And to what did that equate to? And what's your dosing pattern? Are you doing
every other day?
Every other day, right?
Every other day, sub-Q.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
Well, shallow intramuscular, I guess technically.
So I've been doing everything sub-Q for the last year, and man, it's great.
My total test on my last blood test was 950 nanograms per day.
Okay. So then I'm, but you're on dutasteride as well, right?
Yeah, so I have 21% more partitioning towards testosterone, sustaining itself as testosterone, or increase in estradiol as well.
Because I have 1,300 nanograms per deciliter at 120, or give or take. Yeah, slightly more responsive in that regard. But
probably 3,000 right now.
Yeah, and I switched to finasteride. I switched back, because of what we talked about. I might as well bring me up. Yeah, go ahead.
Before we get off that, because I do want to talk about the appetite suppression stuff for tirzepatide, semaglutide, and tesofensine before we get into.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so tesofensine, I personally do not use it because it scares the shit out of me. You have any? Are you planning on using it still?
So I just came off fluvoxamine, and the withdrawal symptoms were quite bad. Luckily, most of them have already been dissipated. And of course, tesofensine is a serotonin norepinephrine dopamine reuptake inhibitor. So it's not only serotonin, it's all three neurotransmitters. And, there's, again, not so much clinical evidence on it, no clinical evidence regarding fertility. I basically have to stop experimenting with this nonsense by the end of February. And so even though I would love to try it, because people that talk about it, they say they have great appetite suppression through the, 5-HT2A receptor or 2B? I can't remember.
It's not that. It's actually the noradrenaline and dopamine. Because I have plenty of experience in this regard. I've taken an SSRIs, SNRIs, norepinephrine, dopamine reuptake inhibitors like Wellbutrin, etc. And listen, if you look at the IC50, which is the minimum amount of drug required to facilitate a 50% drop in a biological process. The IC50 of tesofensine towards the SERT net and DOT are norepinephrine 1.7, SERT 11, and DOT 65, which means that it has a very strong affinity for reuptake norepinephrine and serotonin, and very little dopamine. Well, butane has a greater affinity and tendency to reuptake dopamine more than tesofensine. So it's just a fancy SNRI, so to speak, with more affinity towards norepinephrine. And I wouldn't do this because, like we talked about, tirzepatide, semaglutide, where we can influence appetite through hormonal, through hormonal use, through incretins. Why would we modulate our neurochemistry, our brain, our perception of reality, of how we think, how we respond, our cognition, how we experience things? Because there are a lot of problems downstream that can happen. You saw the side effect of just an SSRI. Now imagine all of three of the monoamines. Because you know what happens when you stop even an SSRI, you have when you have an abundance of serotonin, you downregulate the outer receptors, 5-HT1A, 2A, 2C, and that has consequences longer term. There's 7, but they have their own subtypes. But the problem is they get desynthesized for a longer period of time. When I was on SSRI,
different rates.
In different rates. And also, like, for example, there are heteroreceptors which can accept serotonin and dopamine, and then if serotonin binds to the heteroreceptor, dopamine cannot, and you're decreasing dopamine transmission. So you're playing around with your whole mind for the sake of simply suppressing appetite, which is absolutely stupid. And people are, making money off of it, and just recommending
this shit online. This tesofensine.
No, it's not that
$250. It's $250 for 30 tablets of 0.5 milligram, from what I saw.
Well, I can get it
insane.
For pennies.
Of course, I can get it for pennies too, but like most people don't have access to our sources. So if you go online and you look at some of the peptide websites, they'll charge a big buck. So, like, I think you can get very great appetite suppression with a ketogenic diet and some of these GLP-1, GIP medication. Right? So you're in ketosis and you block a little bit of this receptor pathway. I don't have anything against SSRIs. I mean, personally, I had a great experience with fluvoxamine. The withdrawal is just brutal. But on it, I felt great. Honestly, I felt absolutely fantastic running fluvoxamine. No negative issues there, besides a little bit of gastrointestinal upsets, which dissipated over time. It's just a brutal coming off period. It's worse, way worse than PCT.
But the problem is,
the reason why you felt recreational drugs.
The reason why you felt better, and most people would that bodybuild, is because of the steroids. We have a very profound adrenergic signaling. We're in this sympathetic state constantly, and we miss that inhibition. We miss that resilience, calmness that serotonin provides. But
what do you think? I took the SSRI out first, and then 2 months later take the testosterone out. If I do that at the same time, no, man, I'd be on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. So for you,
miserable.
For you, maybe like probably most guys would benefit from increasing serotonin, but you saw what happens when you come off, and there are a lot of people that have a lot of side effects while on. Now imagine with SNRIs, and when you introduce dopamine to the equation and you have receptor desensitization. I think Michaela Pearson, Derek did a podcast with her. She has a lot of videos about her side effects from coming off Effexor, which is an SNRI, which is very close to this SNDRI. So I wouldn't do that, because noradrenaline also is very important for mental clarity and focus. So if you fuck that aspect, if that pathway, coming off within that induce, decreased cognitive function, alertness,
I would say that this tesofensine is like super end stage appetite management, but it would be a step beyond taking an SSRI for mood management, or testosterone for hormone and well-being management, or Accutane for acne management.
Exactly.
And far beyond finasteride or dutasteride for hair management, right? These are all end-stage drugs. And even though they're available, doesn't mean you have to take it. You have to kind of go through the ringer first and try a couple other options.
Yeah.
I wonder what happened there, because it says phase 2B trial was, the results were reported. It was like I thought this was recent, but it's actually like 2000. 2008 in the Lancet. It was published, which is a long fucking time ago. So it makes you
Is
wonder
it the
what
study
happened.
with 140 people? The obesity study? The clinical trial?
Let's see, 203 obese patients either took 0.25 milligrams, 0.5, or 1, or placebo. And at the time, it was the highest performing weight loss drug that was available among, like, compared to those that were approved for use for this purpose.
Which was nothing.
12.8 kilogram loss average on 1 milligram, 11.3 on half a milligram, and 6.7 on 0.25. So I don't know. Like for me, obviously, this sketches me out from the half-life perspective, and then obviously the withdrawals potential and whatnot.
And
what I would wonder is
from the people I've talked to that run tesofensine for a month and then they come off. They say it's sometime comparable to an SSRI. Brain zaps.
No, it's worse.
The thing that sucks is you can't do like a brain biopsy to assess what your like serotonergic activity is, or like your dopaminergic or adrenergic activity to actually define if you could be because I imagine there is an ideal candidate with genetic predispositions who would actually benefit from like this more broad spectrum like reuptake inhibition, but it's like that would be so hard to figure out if you're like just blindly hoping it works for you.
Why not take an MOA inhibitor then? Because that blocks monoamine oxidase. It's an enzyme that breaks down the monoamines, dopamine, or adrenaline, and serotonin. So when you block it, just like acetylcholinesterase, or it basically helps you not waste them, and more of them will accumulate in the synaptic cleft, and they will bind to the postsynaptic neuron. So that would be a smarter approach if you want to raise all monoamines, rather than using a triple reuptake inhibitor, because the degree of expression is different. And you can do a lumbar puncture, but that's absolutely required to do in that situation. But for sure, side effects would be detrimental.
With MAOIs though, aren't you it's not the same MOA, but it's still achieving a inhibited breakdown that is long-standing through suicidal inhibition, whereby you need to onboard new enzymes to then achieve the level of breakdown that you would have otherwise. So it's kind of like you're still at risk of like a similar outcome, no?
They're reversible.
MOAB like,
but they're reversible. Inhibitor. Yeah. Okay. But that's what I'm saying. You can use a reversible one, so you can go off and not deal with that. A MOAB, which is reversible, would be the sulfinamide. It's a reversible MOAB inhibitor. So maybe you can that raises dopamine significantly, because MOAB is geared towards dopamine degradation. But
couldn't you? Okay, so if you had an Adderall, for example, or a dextroamphetamine specifically at like 5 milligrams or something, that's like reasonable. What does that look like from neurotransmission for mechanism of action comparably to all this stuff? Because it's shorter and you can get it in and out of your system, presumably that is the safer approach. And it's approved, obviously.
The receptor desensitization doesn't happen as with these reuptake inhibitors that are just 24 hours day in and out chronically. You don't get, brain zaps and all of the side effects that are seen with discontinuation of SSRIs and SNRIs. There are people who have discontinued SNRIs that would increase. They would get fibromyalgia-like symptoms. So they would have sharp pains in their extremities, in their lower back. Just random pain that they could not account for. And people who have this, diagnostics, they usually prescribe them Cymbalta, which is an SNRI, because the norepinephrine kind of works anti-inflammatory, and they do not feel their pain that much. And also serotonin works on the 5-HT5 receptor. When it's agonized, it increases pain tolerance. But again, when you go off, there's the feedback. So every time you pull a trigger, there are 2 triggers point right back at you. So I don't think it's wise to fuck around with this, especially when we've talked about semaglutide, tirzepatide, and also let's not forget melanotan too, because it's a AMSH mimetic. Like it also inhibits the HRP neurons as well.
The most potent combo I think I've had is Actually, melanotan I find more useful than semaglutide personally, acutely.
But isn't it more acutely? So you get the flush, you feel a little nausea, and then so
Yeah,
maybe
but
at the end of
it's
the
more
day when you're like,
controllable than though too.
yeah,
So it's like if you, well, I guess hypothetically it's funny because we want acute short acting stuff, but the average person who's using drugs wants like, I don't want to inject shit more than like once a week. This
no,
is terrible.
right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like it's
No, I know
adherence
that's
becomes a concern for like the short acting stuff.
or they want tablets. That's why they have oral semaglutide or exenatide, right? They have
Oh,
oral
which will
versions of
go
that.
up way more.
Yeah, and then the weird thing is like oral semaglutide, I believe it inhibits somatostatin or it promotes somatostatin, so it actually blunts growth hormone secretion. Whereas some of the
Didn't even know
injectable
that.
ones actually promote. Yeah, I looked at it today because we were going through the growth hormone things. So I
SSRIs
went
also
into the
decrease
spiral.
growth hormone because when you desynthesize 5-HT1A, growth hormone decreases. So people
They
on
also worsen.
SSRIs.
They also worsen mitochondrial function, same as MAOIs. They have a negative effect on your mitochondria. So overall energy levels might come down, and overall functioning ATP synthesis might come
Wait, is
down
that
quite a bit.
uncoupling that I was talking about before?
Yeah,
Like you said. Okay, so they're okay. Which drug are we talking about specifically right now? GLP-1?
SSRIs and
No, SSRIs.
SSRIs and MAOIs. Both of them have a negative effect
My
on
bad.
mitochondrial function. Yeah.
And also, one noteworthy mention regarding tesofensine, it's metabolized via the cytochrome P453A4, which is very commonly inhibited with, via a lot of things like grapefruit juice. So, oranges, sorry. So, yeah, I mean, imagine raising those neurotransmitters like that or with other, inhibitors of the CYP453A4. I've seen people get seizures from an abundance of Wellbutrin when they pair it with a 2D6 inhibitor. And that in itself is one. And they had like acute seizures, like seizure episodes, which is brutal. So that's very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Are these
the
Macedonians?
anti-epileptics. Yeah.
No.
This is double checking.
No. It's relevant. It's not Macedonian research.
Crazy Macedonians. Yeah, but this cytochrome P450 enzyme inhibition and overlap and actually induce, like modafinil, for example, induces a lot of cytochrome P450 enzymes. And then fluvoxamine inhibits them, and ketoconazole inhibits them. But ketoconazole is also a substrate for CYP3A4. So it has inhibiting effects, but it's also a substrate, so it gets metabolized by. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why some people that have post-finasteride syndrome, right? They took finasteride or dutasteride, they have libido issues. So besides the allopregnanolone, and then the hormone imbalance that they might create, they discontinue finasteride, which takes some time to metabolize. Especially dutasteride takes forever. But they're still trying to mitigate hair loss by derma rolling and taking ketoconazole or minoxidil, which actually prevents the breakdown of dutasteride and finasteride. So now this hormonal imbalance lasts way longer. And now they're wondering, like, why isn't this libido issue being resolved? It's just another drug that you're taking, preventing the metabolism of another drug that is making it worse. So all these drug interactions, I will document at one point on my YouTube channel.
I've seen, since you mentioned minoxidil as well, I actually found literature suggesting that it has anti-androgenic properties by hijacking the receptors, downstream cellular transcription. And if you look up the side effects of oral minoxidil, Lonitin gynecomastia is also noted there. And without interference in, androgen to estrogen transcription, it can't do that. So, that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
I made a video on that like forever ago, but I don't know like how for a topical application, like I don't know how problematic that could be.
It is if you look up how much of the topical applications are getting, to what degree they have systemic, absorption, it's around 2 to 5 milligrams, which is usually what the oral dose is. Now, I don't think that's the case for everybody. I think the majority do not even get that that far, but for sure there are a lot of people that when they take, even you, dude, when you use topical minoxidil, didn't you swell up in the face and had like bloating without,
Yeah, I gained water, but again, I was so young, like I don't necessarily trust my interpretation of it. as a well thought out experiment. So, but yes, people do definitely get like pretty significant edema from it. Like that's undoubtedly happening. Right. But that's through like a different pathway than AR. Not that I'm saying you suggested that it was, but
no, didn't say that. No, yeah. I'm saying from a hair growth perspective. You know, like one of the ways, because the oral version induces gynecomastia in people. How would it do that?
Such a weird drug for being around for this long that it's like blood pressure medication turned into like weird, like no one even knows how it works still, technically.
Yeah, because they tried, various of different vasodilators, nowhere close as far as efficacy goes. So like, where do you go from there? There has to be, and which is why the whole anti-androgenic effect might be true. Because that may be one of the downstream cellular signaling effects that we're overseeing. Because you're putting it topically on your scalp in super high doses. Like the oral version, they're taking 0.625 to 5 milligrams, whereas topically you put like 100 people to put way more than that, and also dermarol and all that. So if it has inherent,
you probably get more localized, systemic.
If you have, that may induce localized androgen, signaling impairment downstream.
So what's your hair loss stack now that you're all, I don't know, like you're being mindful of autoimmune stuff, but also, and you care more about brain health than you used to, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So I switched from dutasteride to finasteride because, just briefly, I want to share this as an anecdote because I also found literature in rodents, but it's quite interesting. Dutasteride is the successor of finasteride. It blocks all three isoforms of 5-alpha-reductase, which finasteride just works on 5-HT2 and 3. This blocks all three of them, inhibits. And the interesting part was when I went to Germany, I forgot to take my dutasteride, and I was like, the clearance is like, the half-life is like 4 or 5 weeks, super long. I'm good to go. I went there, and as I was drinking just morning coffee, I felt it significantly stronger. But I didn't think anything of it at the time. When I got back, though, there was an incident where I took dexedrine to just finish extra work, and it felt like 40 milligrams. It was insane. And
how much did you take?
I started at 5 milligrams, okay. and then I felt a ton of mental alertness. I took 3 more tabs, so up until 20 mgs, and I was like wired as fuck. I never even felt that way. I thought I was desensitized to stimulants. So basically, the same day, a few hours later, I saw the GlaxoSmithKline box smiling at me, and I was like, okay, let me take 5 tablets. Because that's the highest effective dose, 2.5 milligrams, the most effective dose, because it inhibits like more than 71% of scalp DHT. I take it, and then 3 hours later, I'm retarded. Like I was sleepy. I fell asleep, dude. And when I woke up, I actually texted you, right? And I told you what the fuck is going on. And then I did research, and come to find out that 5-alpha-reductase 1 is very important for cellular on a cellular level. Cellular response to catecholamines, to noradrenaline, to adrenaline, and to glucocorticoids, and to cellular metabolism of serotonin. And when I looked up the SRD5A1 gene, which encodes for 5-alpha-reductase 1, it's expressed in the brain everywhere. Where if you check for SRD5A2, which is 5-alpha-reductase 2, it's only expressed in the midbrain. So 5-R1 has a significantly greater effect on the brain than 5-HT2. With finasteride, we inhibit 2 and 3. So dutasteride will have a significantly greater neurological implications than just taking finasteride. And to reference quickly the study that coincides with what I'm saying, they basically gave rats a super high dose of finasteride at 100 milligrams per kg, which at that dose it gained affinity for 5-alpha-reductase 1. And then they later infused them with amphetamines. And what happened was the locomotor effects of amphetamines were completely ameliorated, and they didn't behave like they're amphetamines at all. And the effects were so strong they were comparable to haloperidol, which is an antipsychotic. So that was basically, the study suggested that may be a novelty method of treating schizophrenia. And there's another study in females where they give them dutasteride because it blocks 5-alpha-reductase. And basically, people lose allopregnanolone because progesterone converts into 5-alpha reduces into allopregnanolone, and they saw that they were significantly more calmer because during their periods, their menstrual cycle, their levels are all over the place, right? So their allopregnanolone levels are up and down, and allopregnanolone works on GABA, and GABA desynthesizes very fast. We see that with benzos, and now when allopregnanolone is high, GABA gets desynthesized, and anything below that it's anxiogenic rather than anxiolytic. So they had like a better effect from a perspective of being anti-anxious, being anxiolytic with dutasteride. So it has there's a lot of truth to this.
I'm going to say what everyone would be thinking that I was thinking at the time is, how do you take one dose that has a 5-week half-life and get an effect 3 hours later where you feel stupid? And then you told me what?
Because you're looking at only the effects on DHT. You're looking at the majority of the DHT inhibition goes to 5-alpha reductase 2. We're not talking about that. We're talking about 5-R1, which is completely different. It may have a completely different neurological effect and metabolic effect to the drug, because we don't have a proxy to measure that. So
yeah, so like obviously immediately I'm skeptical that it could have any acute onset of effects like in this short order, but there's no way to prove that it doesn't as well. Because it's like, if you look at the half-life of dutasteride, like you're looking at literally half a year to clear the drug, which is up from a fertility perspective to think about having to plan that far out. But anyways, yeah, like I couldn't, obviously I'm skeptical, but like I couldn't say otherwise. Personally, I can say I've tried Adderall and other, stimulatory, euphoric inducing type drugs to kind of see what my response is like as somebody who's on dutasteride and has been on finasteride and, vice versa, and kind of knows what my response is like to stuff. And I still get the kind of like hypersexual type effects from it. So I don't think, so it makes me wonder. The only thing I can conclude is if I wasn't on any of this, any 5-AR inhibiting drugs, like what would that look like then? Would I be just like a freak at that point? I don't know.
And I literally asked my friend, because he started dutasteride. He got a hair transplant a few weeks ago, actually. He started dutasteride and he's prescribed methylphenidate, Ritalin. And he got on dutasteride and asked him, bro, do you feel it the same? And he said, no, I don't understand why. I'm taking the same dose, but I don't feel the same effect. Not talking from a euphoria standpoint alone. Like he just gets more brain fog and more lethargic way quicker during the day. Now, granted, he started it relatively soon, but like the difference was night and day. And again, I'm not just saying this. I'm basing it off of a rat study, like the.
Wait, was he not on any 5-AR inhibitor, got a hair transplant, and then
he was on finasteride prior.
Oh, and then he switched to dutasteride.
Yes. So he was on finasteride, felt fine, used methylphenidate, had no problem, switched to dutasteride, boom. And now he switched back, obviously.
What I can say, though, is I feel no different using stimulants on dutasteride than I do finasteride, personally. However, I don't really know for sure that other stuff isn't being impeded, like information assimilation, memory formation, etc. And it makes me skeptical of like, how smart could I be if I never took this shit at all? I don't know.
Listen, you can't dispute gene expression. You can't dispute the SRT 5A1 where it's expressed. You can dispute a lot of things, and there are a lot of anecdotes online. People bitch about drugs regardless, but there's some merit to when you start seeing objective evidence as far as where the enzyme is expressed, when you find some rodent status, when you gather anecdotal reports in humans, like that's not a definite this is happening for sure, but it's not like he's talking shit. This has no merit at all. This is just a matter of something to go off of, and then hopefully someone would further research and maybe we'll
also be mindful that don't take this as a dictation of you should or shouldn't do something. It's just interesting information to be considerate of, because like Alek's pretty fucking hypersensitive to everything that I've seen. Like he took minoxidil and got like destroyed. So there's Yeah, like didn't you have like what is it? Orthostatic hypotension from topical minoxidil or something?
Yeah,
Wow.
it did. And yeah. I mean when you look at the pharmacodynamics and what the drug does, like it does that. It's a vasodilator. When you apply it, I used to do a lot of it. And if my scalp, if my capillaries are sensitive, and my skin, my permeability maybe of the scalp is greater than other people, I may have systemic absorption to a greater degree. But also locally, if you vasodilate your scalp, like why wouldn't that affect your brain and your nervous system downstream? Because you're applying a huge amount of local vasodilator on your scalp where your fucking brain is. Like, why would it be a surprise that it can mediate that effect? And I mean,
it will get absorbed and go get a little bit of a localized effect. Yeah, you always got to be careful, and there could be some drug interactions with some of the other medications that you're taking. That have been poorly documented. Because when you go through the cytochrome P450 enzymes, like only a couple of them have been extensively studied, but there's how many? 20,
50,
30,
I think.
40. Yeah, 50 different kinds.
50, and only 3 or 4 are like...
Yeah, only 3 or 4 are really. So luckily CYP2 and CYP3 have to do with drug and steroid metabolism. But I'm sure like CYP11 has to do with steroid biosynthesis. So CYP11A, B, and B2. Let me see if those are... No. So those haven't really been extensively documented regarding which one is an inhibitor, which is an inducer. Okay, the substrates are known, but it's like if you really want to piece it together, we'll probably need another 50 years of scientific evidence. So,
So speaking of brain health, and this could be like our final topic. I feel like this was an interesting thread that kind of went viral. This is just a thread from my subreddit, but a ton of people have been talking about it on Twitter. Is Conor McGregor apparently had his likes, like on Twitter, what you like is public, and apparently he liked some like picture of some dude just like yanking it on Twitter, because Twitter is kind of like pro porn, I guess. Like you can advertise your OnlyFans and whatever, and just like show nudity and do whatever you want.
Oh, wow.
So like on his likes,
Elon.
like So again, I don't know for sure that this is legit, but it's gone around pretty viral at this point. It seems like a lot of people have called him out for it. And the title of this subreddit thread is "Looks like our guy Connor started sucking the D2. Trend is going mainstream, boys." So like there's and like obviously Connor right now is like exempt from drug testing, so he can sort of do. Well, I think he might have entered the window recently, actually. But anyways, there is the idea that progestogenic drugs, especially Trenbolone, has like significant psychoactive effects. We've seen like rodent studies showing like beta amyloid plaque buildup. We've seen the night sweats that fuck up your sleep quality, which downstream could have bad effects on your actual health status. Has a weird trend cough. Like there's a lot of weird stuff that comes from it. What have you guys seen personally as far as its effects on the brain from a hypersexual or like deviant / like deviation from your baseline activity, and just like effects in a skewing of psychological state aspect?
Go first, Steve.
So I do know that the ladyboys of Thailand, they like the guys to be on Tren because they're far more receptive.
Oh, wow.
And I know several dudes here in the gym who are super nice guys, highly successful. They go on Tren and all they want is to bang ladyboys.
What the? Okay, so
is this at any dose, or like, because I know the dose?
No, that's like an effective dose of, let's say, 350 milligrams a week. That's like that. Before that was acceptable. Nowadays, we kind of get away with 150, 225 milligrams. And of course, way back in the day on the GH15 boards was like a one-up each other. So some people would do 150 milligrams per day. So at the higher dosages, you see that people get sexually deviant. And then they, whether they get interested in guys or they're interested in ladyboys. Yeah, I see that occur quite a bit. But it's only because the gay scene and the ladyboy scene here in Thailand is so big. I didn't see that in Holland. You know,
I think
it's like
maybe that was
environmental
kind of
circumstances. Don't you think they would just like
yes.
block to that area though too, because they might already be into that, or I don't know.
I
Yeah,
think
it could be, and then the trend just pushes them over the edge. But so here I see that way more than I see in the Western world. But I've had consultations with guys that told me that when they're on tren over a particular dose, that they get, they sexually deviate until more obscure stuff.
What
Whether
if we look,
that's other dudes or lady
what's the
boys,
sexual deviancy dose?
I would say over 300 milligrams per week. Yeah,
let me
but it's
interject
also
about this.
the effective dose.
I think
That's how I remember for myself when I was running boatloads of tren, like way back when, 300, 700 milligrams a week. Yeah, you turn into a sexual monster. I would have, like, when I was single, and I'd have like 5, 6 girlfriends on standby just for booty calls at the end of the night because you couldn't control yourself. I was just like, I'm gonna, if I don't call a girl, I'm gonna, go American Pie style. Luckily, I never dabbled in the other direction, but yeah, I was almost uncontrollable. You just want to eat, and you want to YouTube algorithm. We got to be careful, and or you're angry all the time. One of those three, your basic emotions.
Have you had
you want to
a girlfriend on tren?
I had my wife, but she requested me to stop 8 years ago, so I obliged.
No, but prior, because we're not allowed to touch on that area. Then prior, have you dated? Have you dated anybody while on tren?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
I want to ask you whether your sexual desire for your partner actually decreased or not. I'm not talking about others.
On tren?
So your desire to cheat.
I think you I know you get a little bit more selective on what you want to sleep with. And then I do remember coming off tren, you find your partner less attractive because on tren you're like ready to roll all the time. You want a little bit shorter girl with more voluminous, and then you come off and you're like, this is not really my thing anymore.
In my opinion,
you feel like it's,
in my opinion, I think it has effects, profound effects on the dopamine system. If you look up drugs like such as dopamine agonists, pramipexole, Kava, whatever, one of their side effects is that if you're prone to gambling, to porn or whatever, it can heighten it, right? So I think with tren, I think it really hinders the dopamine system and actually makes people behave in a deviant way because they crave dopamine. I think it depletes the brain from dopamine, and that's why people go crazy. I don't think it's about the ladyboys. I think it's about doing the most F thing that you can think of.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. It's not about that. It's just, and what else is beyond that outside
but
of?
But then logically, this is interesting how you say this, because like increase in gambling and whatever. The guy who ran FTX, do you know Sam Bankman-Fried? Have you heard of that whole debacle?
Of course.
Alek? Yeah, the FTX. Yeah.
Thanks for crashing Bitcoin so I could buy more.
So his stats apparently involve mainly amphetamine, selegiline, which is a selective MAO. Yeah, and then potentially like adrenal, which is like a precursor to modafinil that's liver toxic. Right. But anyways, he was using like an array of stimulatory compounds that affect like neurotransmission, dopaminergic activity, as well as the actual deamination of that as well, to actually break it down. So this guy's in a perpetual state of like heightened dopaminergic activity and has this, he's an N of 1 obviously, but what we see typically with those guys is they have like the gambling tendencies, the whatever, and are like willing to do like weird shit like that.
Didn't he do that? Like millions of dollars he gambled away on, and these were assets of the customers.
Yeah. But if we have a depletion of dopamine, would that not have the opposite effect then that we see in these psychological impacting drugs like regularly?
But that's the thing though. First, you mentioned this guy. Just a quick note on the selegiline. It gears towards MAO-B, but it's irreversible. So the effects, even if you stop, linger on for months and months. A ton of time. Now, as far as that goes, the thing with tren is, I think it actually negatively impacts the dopamine system, and it makes people crave certain, those type of activities
Stimulus.
as a rebound, as a negative, as a, how do I say it, countermeasurement to what's going on. It makes them, and since they're hyperadrenergic from adrenaline, because Tren is very adrenergic, it increases adrenaline a lot. I think the nightmares are because of that. If you look at prazosin, which is an alpha-1 blocker, it's prescribed for people who have nightmares, and it ameliorates nightmares. MK677 through ghrelin, it increases adrenaline. That's why people have vivid dreams, sometimes scary dreams on it, where on growth hormone you don't get that. I think with Tren is the hyper adrenergic signaling. You're like super hyped up and you crave dopamine because you miss it, essentially, and that's why you
serotonin system also gets downregulated with
all of them. So all of them. But so that's the problem. You're like a maniac.
Maybe you do need some cabergoline then when you're on Tren.
Yeah.
So you can offset and then worsen your cardiac markers, your cardiac function even more.
Then use Ramy.
But you think that using a dopamine receptor agonist that decreases your refractory period to nothingness, like you're a teenager, would support you being less hypersexual? Like, I don't see.
No, so you'd be less of a sexual deviant, but you'll still be hypersexual, but probably more in the direction that you were previously.
Yeah.
Because I've combined Trenbolone with Caber. Man, I have to go back really, really far now. If I changed my preference. I know. I'm sure somebody in the comment section will let us know.
Because me on Tren, I had no interest in my partner. Like, I just wanted to have sex with the ugliest chick that I could see, which I'm not like that. Like, I was like, my neighbor, oh damn, she's ugly as F, and I was.
So did you seek novelty more? You think like it's
novelty stimulus? Yeah, could be.
Which is that a? I don't know. Yeah.
Imagine like with rats when they get them addicted to cocaine, and they remove it and then put cocaine and food side by side, like they go for the cocaine rather than food. So with Tren, you're like super high adrenergic, you're like amped out of your mind, so you don't feel dopamine deficient, you're not like lacking in energy or whatever, like you're all hyped up, but you crave the dopamine because you're lacking it. That's why people can get sexual dysfunction, and by dysfunction I mean their dick stops working on Tren, which it shouldn't happen if it doesn't antagonize dopamine.
Yeah, they watch obscure porn to kind of fulfill that dopamine hit, and then they're so disconnected from what's possible in the real world.
Because like you have this hyperandrogenic compound. It should mandate a very high erection quality. A lot of people have diminished erection quality. Not talking about sex, urge to have sex. I'm talking about erection quality. The longer they stay on, a lot of people, report that anecdotally. So I think that's basically the situation.
Yeah. For me, the thing I think that deviates people the most, probably, and this is my hypothesis, is more so the hypersexual activity leads to excessive masturbation, first of all, and the sensory input you need for actually supporting this like frequency of masturbation to actually be able to get off leads to an acclimation of like deviant type of stimulatory input, which then conditions your brain to need like excessive amounts of novelty above like what your partner can provide. Is like,
and that's where the ladyboys come in, because they cater to that 100%.
I personally,
they know exactly how to fulfill those needs.
Yeah. I personally do not, I don't indulge in porn or masturbation or anything like that deliberately on purpose. And I still felt that way. Like, I just wanted to do, whatever that, I would walk down the street and I would just count how many guys I can take in a fight at once.
Oh, yeah. Those kind of weird thoughts, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I had those too. That's why I had to stop. You literally feel like you can throw a bus.
And you want to. That's the problem.
Like
and you want.
I want to flip this bus over. Yeah. I'm so happy I got off that stuff, man. What a horrible.
Yeah, it's poison.
You can usually tell what guys are in the gym or like on their first Tren cycle.
Oh yeah,
There's like
100%.
walking around with a chip on their shoulder and like aggressively moving shit and just being like a dead.
Slamming
But
weights, slamming
you can,
weights, not picking it up, curling and throwing it. I'm like, oh my god.
but you can say
Relax.
that for anything though. The placebo effect is like 30% in some studies. You know, sometimes they can shave their head and put a tattoo sleeve, you know, on their arm, and they would act that way, you know, as if
Maybe.
they're on trend, you know. So that's
Yeah.
it's a matter of trend is very romanticized now on TikTok and Instagram. All the memes, everything's about trend, and like people. And the problem is supplement companies and clothing companies, whatever, they reward this type of behavior. They sponsor people like this. They you know directly have effect in the problem, because they, what message does that send? You know, you see these kids and they're like, oh, I'm on trend, my name is Alex Trend this, trend that, and look at me, how fancy I am, and making all this money. And some other people, you know, younger kids would see that and it would be like, okay, that's the answer, you know. And how can I say don't take trend, guys, if everything I have made is because of that persona, you know? So like that's a big problem, which kind of pisses me off.
Maybe everybody should claim natural then, you know?
Nah, just do not
solution.
glorify drug use. Like simple as fucking that. I mean, that's that's all.
I wish Trenbolone. I wish I never took it. Yeah, that was one of the drugs that I know did more harm than good. Okay, I felt like a god in the gym, but that was only 1.5 hours a day, 5 times a week. Was it all worth it? Nah. I've built more muscle afterwards with test GH and insulin, you know, and I was a lot more mentally sound during that time than I was on trend. Oh man, it was not good. So regarding Conor McGregor, man, he is having a great time. I think he's having the time of his life right now. Yeah,
yeah.
Remember when that first video came out when he started posing? He's like,
yeah,
and like I know exactly what that feels like, Connor.
Oh yeah, some of the behavior is like skewing weird too. Like even just the stuff he does in the videos, and a lot of people will say it's like cocaine or like
and alcohol.
You know, yeah,
the whiskey brand.
Who knows, man? But
yeah,
Irish
people.
A lot of guys start believing their own hype.
Yeah.
I see that with a lot of guys that get super popular. They do all this weird stuff. I see that with a lot of social media influencers now. They go weird, and it's their stick. So
it's rewarded. That's the problem. It is rewarded. Like you get publicized, you get talked about. You know, people love to see that, and that's the thing. It gets rewarded. If it's
rewarded, you know.
If it's penalized, then it won't be a repetitive behavior. The rewarding problem,
unfortunately, it will always be there. You know, usually these personas come and go quite fast. So
that's true.
It's okay.
That's true.
Yeah, let's go. Everybody gets bored of the persona, then they move on to the next guy. You know.
Yeah, who does crazier things and crazier and crazier, progressively overloading on craziness.
Yeah. More dopamine hits today, please.
But they're taking out generations with them, because again, the people that are impressionable and watch them, you know,
but I think with age you get kind of bored of that as well, because I used to get entertained by these kinds of guys, and now I'm like, oh, here comes another one, you know. And now it's totally not interesting. Yeah, it's totally not interesting anymore, because it's all more of the same, and there's no value there. It's just entertainment. So in that sense, I think as you get older, you kind of like, I don't really care. Let me do my own research.
So what time is it over there, Steve?
It's 4 o'clock. I should be in bed, but I'm too hyped up, so I'll stay awake for another hour. Hey, at least we made it happen, man. It only took almost a year for this to come to fruition. But Derek, you made a promise. This is every month now, right? Right?
Yeah, I will do another one much sooner than the last one for sure.
So half a year.
It could be at 8 months.
Anywhere.
Comment below if you want a monthly Supraphysiological Man podcast. And I think we should think about starting a Patreon so we could do some listener questions. So instead of collecting questions.
Instead of doing like my Instagram thing that I did. That was kind of to sort through. So, okay. Well, yeah, if you want to, sure.
I started a Patreon for myself, so that's picking up some steam. But I think for this podcast, if we're going to do it more often, because there's so many things we can discuss, but there's only so much time we have. I mean, now we've been recording for 3 hours, so I think a Patreon would do well. Then we can let the people decide what they would want to see, maybe 50 topics, and then we'll address the top 20, and then continue the next month. So anyway, let us know down below if you're down for that, if you're down for something like that.
Yeah, up to you guys. So,
then we can buy Alek a new camera. Alek the Great needs a new camera. So
I'll buy it for sure next week. So yeah, my apologies on that.
All right, everyone's up to Steve and Alek, and on their respective channels. They should be. I guess I don't know where this full one is.
A little bit more excitement for the subs.
And if you made it to the end, if you made it to the end, what do you comment to show that you watched?
We want a monthly podcast.
Yeah,
that would make Derek accountable.
Yeah,
if not, just text him directly on Instagram.
That will be the key word. Supraphysiological Man podcast every freaking month.
Yeah. Hashtag.
All right. Well, anyways, thanks for I guess everyone making the schedule work. It's funny. We have like the entire globe of time zones here right now, essentially.
Yeah.
So thanks to you guys, and I guess thank you guys for watching. I don't know where the stop record button is here. I've never used StreamYard, but I guess you got it right.
I'll stop recording. Don't worry. When it gets awkward, I'll stop recording.
All right.
Anyway, thanks you guys so much for watching. Have a nice day, and more coming soon. Peace out.